call the August 28th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting to order. We have roll call, please, and determination of a quorum.
Chair Settler. Vice Chair Borders.
Here.
Commissioner Dors. Commissioner Eswine. Commissioner Preston. Commissioner Tingle.
Here.
Commissioner Wiggins. A quorum's present.
Thank you. Commissioner Wiggins, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Sure. Please stand. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner. Public comment. The public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Planning Commission, including any matters that is not specifically included on the agenda as for an action item. Is there any public comment at this time? Seeing none, moving on. For possible action, approval of minutes for our July meeting. Is there any changes or questions, or we'll have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I would move that we approve the minutes of the July 31st meeting.
I'll second.
Commissioner Eschwein approves. Commissioner Borders seconds. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Modification of agenda. Staff, is there any modification needed on the agenda?
No modifications.
Thank you. Meeting items. E1, AB 19-104, for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding a request for an abandonment of a public right-of-way totaling 6.7 acres in the following four specific areas. The portion of Morgan Mill Road located approximately 377 feet east of Antler Drive, the portion of Draco Way extending south from Astro Drive, and all of Caribou Drive and Unicorn Drive. Heather?
Thank you, Heather Ferris, for the record. The area of abandonment is within the Plateau Tentative Subdivision Map Project Area, which was approved by the Board of Supervisors on December 20th, 2018. If approved, the entire right-of-way area highlighted here would be abandoned. This includes portions of Draco Way between Astro and Morgan Mill, the entirety of Unicorn Drive and Caribou Drive, and the small portion of Morgan Mill, which lies within the boundaries of the Plateau development. In total, the area to be abandoned is 6.706 acres and is unimproved. The abandoned right-of-ways would be reverted back to the adjacent parcels. Staff is also concurrently processing a lot line adjustment for the parcels adjacent to this abandonment. As part of the lot line adjustment, the applicant will be creating a new access and public utility easement that will ensure each parcel has access. Staff has recommended a condition of approval requiring the concurrent processing and recording of the lot line adjustment in order to ensure access is provided to each lot. The new access and public utility easements are essentially consistent with the roadways that were shown on the Plateau tentative subdivision map. The Planning Commission reviews the abandonment and makes recommendation to the board. The board has the authority to approve the abandonment. When considering an abandonment, the Planning Commission and board must be able to make all 7 findings in the affirmative. Staff was able to make all findings in the affirmative and is recommending approval, subject to the 5 conditions that are included in the staff report. Chris Baker with Manhard Consulting is here on behalf of the applicant, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, would the applicant like to come forward, please? Welcome, sir. Would you state your name for the record?
Chris Baker with Manhard Consulting here on behalf of the applicant. I'd like to thank Heather for her presentation. I don't really have much to add. We agree with staff's recommendation for approval and the conditions as laid out. Again, these were offered for dedication some time ago and never accepted by the city. and obviously are in conflict with the previously approved tentative map. So this is the first step just for us to move forward. So, thank you.
Any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Public comment. We'll open it for public comment on this item. Does anyone wish to make comment on this specific item? Again, seeing none, we'll bring it back for further discussion or a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, sir.
I move to recommend that the Board of Supervisors approve AB 19-104 based on the findings and subject to conditions of approval contained in the staff report.
We have a motion for Commissioner Doers. We have a second. Commissioner Preston,
I second.
all in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? Thank you. Okay, where's my agenda again? Moving on. E2, AB 19-122 for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding request for an abandonment of public right-of-way, specifically South Minnesota Street between West Street and West King Street, adjacent to and between APN 003-206-2 and 003-207-4.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hope Sullivan, Planning Manager. This section of road is between the Brewery Arts Center and the Performance Hall. It's been closed for the last couple of years due to, via an encroachment agreement. So you've seen boulders there for a couple of years now while those facilities have been utilizing the road. And now they'd like to formally abandon the road. The city is the applicant. In considering this abandonment, the Planning Commission must consider 7 required findings. I want to speak to just one of these 7 findings, and that's finding number 6. Finding number 6 asks if utility easements should be reserved, continued, or vacated. The city does have utilities in the right-of-way, and the existing right-of-way conveys stormwater. Therefore, the city is recommending 2 conditions. These conditions are in your staff report, but I've worked with our development engineering, and we do have some modifications to the language in number 5 and number 6. And I'll read that into the record for the benefit of the commissioners. Number 5, as modified, would say, public utility and public drainage easements must be retained over the entirety of the abandoned segment to allow for utilities and to ensure that any future improvements to the abandoned roadway do not impede flood surface flows or stormwater drainage. The modification to number 6 would state, if utility work is required, let me start again on that, number 6. If utility work is required in the public utility and public drainage easement, the surface repair may be limited to city standards for asphalt, concrete, and base material and thickness by the party performing the utility work. There will be no obligation to repair to the pre-existing surface condition. Now that I've read those into the record, let me explain. Okay, on number 5, what was included in the staff report was a public utility easement, and the language is very similar. After the report went out, we realized we failed to identify a public drainage easement as well. So it's really important that recognize that this is an area not just for utilities, for drainage, in addition to underground utilities. The second, number 6, the objective in the condition number 6 was essentially, let's say it becomes sculptures in that area where the PUE is and the drainage easement is, and the Public Works needs to get in there to fix their utilities. They don't want the obligation of restoring, say, pavers and sculptures and gardens and things like that. They're just putting the future owners on notice that if we need to go in and maintain it, we'll put in asphalt, we'll put in concrete, we're going to patch it, but we're not obligated to bring it back to whatever condition it was in prior to the work occurring. And it's with those conditions that our Public Works Department feels like they can support this request for abandonment. As we've talked about at a number of meetings, when we talk about abandonments, only the Board of Supervisors can abandon the right-of-way. The Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. Staff does believe that with the conditions of approval, the required findings can be met, and we are recommending that you recommend approval to the Board of Supervisors. Stephanie Hicks, the city's real property manager, is present and is the applicant, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff on this item? Commissioner Borders?
Is somebody going to readdress, I've read it in here, but I didn't quite understand it, how the parking lot access is going to work when we get to it?
I'll speak to it initially, and then Stephanie Hicks may have supplemental comments. Right now, where the boulders are, you can go down Minnesota Street and access one of the parking lots. That same parking lot actually also has access on the street to the north, King Street. Right, so we will not be stopping access to that roadway. Now, the future property owners may accommodate parking, and it sounds like in reading the application that that's their intention, but there's nothing in the abandonment that would obligate the future property owner to utilize the abandoned area for parking.
Any other questions? Commissioner Doors?
And Commissioner Doors for the record. So I might be overthinking, but your example got me kind of thinking. So if we abandon this and let's say they do sculptures and the sculptures are not in any way in the way of drainage or water flow or anything, but they're completely over anything that needs to be repaired. I didn't notice any verbiage that would cover moving the sculptures or moving personal property or, what happens then?
And in fairness, I probably used a bad example because when development engineering identified this as a requirement for the abandonment, and Stephen Potay's present, he was thinking pavers. And so he was thinking if there were pavers there, Public Works in maintaining their own infrastructure inside the easement didn't want the obligation of putting back pavers. That's just cumbersome, it's labor intensive, it's more expensive. And so that probably would have been the better example to use. But clearly, like any easement, an easement in your backyard, let's just say you have an electrical line easement, the electric company has the right to access it, and if you have things in the way, they have the right to remove it so they can access and maintain their equipment.
Other questions for staff? Seeing none, would the applicant like to come forward, please? Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Stephanie Hicks, Carson City Real Property Manager. We have reviewed the comments and worked with Hope on those modifications, and so we are in agreement with them.
Okay.
For a little bit of background to the Planning Commission, as this moves forward to the Board of Supervisors, another component of this is that the city is working with the Brewery Arts Center right now to reconvey the property back to them. So right now, the city is the owner of the Brewery Arts Center with a lease back to the Brewery Arts Center, and we're working to actually reconvey that to them. So by closing the road, it allows them to kind of join their campuses together. They know there are restrictions because of the drainage flows that go through there and also the utilities, so we'll be coordinating with that as they move forward.
Any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you. Public comment. At this time, the public welcome any public comment on this particular item. Seeing none, we'll bring it back for further discussion or a motion.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Borders.
I move to recommend to the Board of Supervisors approval of AB 19-122, an abandonment of a portion of South Minnesota Street between West 2nd Street and West King Street based on the 7 findings and subject to the conditions of approval as amended in the staff report.
We have a motion from Commissioner Borders, a second from Commissioner Tingle. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. Thank you. Moving on. E3, SUP-19-118, for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding a request for a special use permit for a marijuana production facility located at 4949 Highway 50 East, number A-4, APN 008-371-05. Heather?
Thank you. Heather Ferris, Associate Planner for the record. This is a request for a special use permit for a marijuana production facility. Marijuana production has been occurring at this location for approximately 3 years. The facility uses marijuana trim oil that's purchased from licensed cultivators and producers for use in edibles, manufacturing, or further refined for other cannabis products. A special use permit was first approved in 2015 for marijuana production, and another special use permit was approved in 2017 for the expansion of the facility. There are no proposed changes to the previously approved operation of the production facility. However, the current owner of the facility will be merging with another company, resulting in a change in ownership. Per Carson City Development Standards 1.20.1A, a special use permit is not transferable between owners and operators. Therefore, a new special use permit is required with the change of ownership. The facility consists of an intake room, extraction area, refinement areas, edible manufacturing area, packaging area, shipping and receiving, storage room, office, and break rooms. It currently employs 9 full-time employees and 7 part-time employees. And again, there's no proposed changes to the operation. Staff is not aware of any issues with this operation. I did reach out to the sheriff's office, and they were able to confirm that they have not had any negative contacts or derogatory marks during the inspections for this property. Per Carson City Municipal Code, marijuana establishments are a conditional use in the general industrial zoning district and therefore require a special use permit subject to meeting the supplemental standards outlined in Division 1.20 of the development standards. A detailed analysis of how those standards are being met is included on page 7 of the staff report. The Planning Commission is authorized to approve a special use permit upon making each of the required 7 findings in the affirmative. Staff did make all findings in the affirmative and is recommending approval of the special use permit, subject to 17 conditions of approval, which are included in the staff report. Jen Juby is here on behalf of the applicant and may wish to address the commission, and with that, I'm available for questions.
Any questions for staff? Commissioner Borders?
Heather, on the conditions of approval in this special use permit, are they identical to the conditions of approval in the previous special use permit? Or are there any, if they're not, what changed?
They're very similar, but this is an entirely new special use permit, so we're starting from scratch, essentially. The 2 previous special use permits are no longer valid once the change of ownership occurs.
I understand, but the operation is the same. I just
The
wondered
operation
if
is the same. I
if
believe
there's
we deleted.
anything that's changed in
I
the
believe we
permits.
deleted a condition that required bars to be maintained on the windows.
Other questions for staff? Seeing none, would the applicant come forward, please? State your name for the record, if you would. Yeah.
Sorry, Jen Juby, Director of Operations with MRD. And thank you very much.
First of all, the 17 conditions of approval, you're in agreement with those as
Yes.
written?
Yes,
Okay.
we are in
You got
agreement.
anything you'd like to add to Heather's presentation or for us?
Yes, I
Certainly.
do. I definitely want to let you know that the operations have been, we've been working with the community. The former founder and CEO, Lucinda, has been working with the community. We intend on doing the exact same thing. The only change will be who's operating. Everyone working there will be retained.
Questions for the applicant? Commissioner Borders?
Yes. Are there bars on the windows now?
There are not bars on the windows now. Oh, sorry, yes, I have Steve here.
Excuse
Sorry.
me, Mr. Chair, if I might. All the windows are barred and all the doors are double locked so that there's no entry except electronic at this time.
Okay.
Forgive me, Francis Mahoney.
Okay, so the previous special use permit required the bars, and they are in place. This permit doesn't require the bars. Are they going to take them down?
We have no intention of taking the bars down.
I was just curious, I was going to ask the same, why we removed that. I mean, I would think that would be a security thing was there a reason that was dropped from the requirements?
We don't have a requirement for that.
When we did these originally, there was a requirement, correct?
That was an original condition of approval, but we don't have anything that would require the bars to be on the windows.
I'm imagining that so it fits in even more into what the surroundings, et cetera, and it hasn't been a need to have it. Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Any other questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
This time we'll open this item up for public comment. Is there anyone wishing to make public comment on this item? If not, we'll bring it back for a motion or discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Eswine.
I move to approve SUP-19-118 based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report.
We have a motion from Commissioner Eswine. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Commissioner Wiggins. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Fine. Good. Thank you. Moving on to the next item. E4, TSM-19-124. I'm going to read this, and then I would like to make a statement before we turn it over to staff. For possible action, discussion and possible action regarding a tentative subdivision map to create 29 single-family lots within the Schultz Ranch specific plan area on property zone single-family 6,000. Schultz Ranch specific plan area located at the southern titmus of Wheeler Peak Drive, approximately 600 feet south of Racetrack Road and 750 feet east of Center Drive, APN 009-319-47. I just wanted to state I was somewhat concerned with the letters we have received from property owners in that area. Most of the letters regarded views and the fact that they were promised by the builders, et cetera, that the views would be maintained. One letter even stated they paid $10,000 more for a premium lot, promising these views. I just wanted to state for the public here, I'm well into my 9th year and probably the first or second meeting of this board, we realized that the only way you can protect views is to own the property you're looking over to see these views. This board or this property owner or the staff have no control over views unless there possibly is an agreement at the time it was developed between surrounding property owners and whatever that would have to be filed, et cetera, and legally done. So the view issue from these letters concerned me, but I think their issue should be with Lennar Homes and the people at Lennar Homes that made that promise to them. As I say, we have no control over that, nor does staff. So at that point, now I'll turn it over to staff, to Heather, and we'll proceed. I just wanted to clarify that for you folks before we started.
Thank you. The subject parcel is zoned single-family 6,000 and is part of the Schultz Ranch specific plan. It was included in the original approval of the Schultz Ranch subdivision as Phase 5. The Schultz Ranch subdivision was approved in 2005 for a total of 521 units. Phase 5 included 25 lots, ranging in size from just over 7,000 square feet to approximately 15,000 square feet. 2 extensions were granted, ultimately extending the approval of the map to August 21st of 2011, and subsequent to granting those extensions, the city and the developer entered into a development agreement extending the expiration of the tentative map even further and outlining the phasing plan. In addition, at that time, the owners of Phase 5 elected to no longer be part of the project, thereby nullifying Phase 5 of the project and reducing the total number of units to be developed in the original Schultz Ranch subdivision. While the parcel is included in the specific plan area, The parcel is no longer part of the overall subdivision for Schultz Ranch and is not subject to the development agreement. The parcel is currently undeveloped and bordered on the north and east by phases 1 and 3 of the Schultz Ranch Common Open Space Development. A 5.81 acre single-family residential parcel is to the south, and 4 parcels ranging in size from 2 acres to 3.25 acres are on the west side. The tentative subdivision map proposes the division of 7.94 acres into 29 single-family residential lots, ranging in size from 6,600 square feet to 15,653 square feet. Development will be consistent with the specific plan by providing varied streetscapes, larger buffer lots along the southern and westernmost property lines, and increased setbacks for those buffer lots. There's a detailed analysis of compliance with the specific plan beginning on page 10 of the staff report, and we can go over any part of that if the Planning Commission has questions. Access is proposed from Tule Peak Circle, also known as Chalk Bluff Drive, and Wheeler Peak Drive, both existing roads within the adjacent Schultz Ranch development. We have received 9 letters from adjacent landowners voicing concerns and opposition to the project. You should have them in your packet and as late material. Many of the concerns were related to views, as the chair pointed out. I did look into whether or not there were any private deed restrictions on the property related to views or any other type of development, and was unable to locate anything that would indicate any development restrictions on the property. As you know, views are not protected, and therefore it is not something that's evaluated in the analysis of a project. However, staff has incorporated a requirement for single-story homes and increased setbacks along the southern and western boundary, which is consistent with the specific plan. Other concerns raised include impacts on traffic, water, sewer, drainage, and public spaces, as well as impacts on existing wells in the area. As I discussed previously, this area was planned for development, and the existing infrastructure, including roads, water and sewer, drainage, parks, trails, have all been planned and or constructed consistent with the specific plan, which anticipated development on this property. The Planning Commission conducts a public hearing and advises the board if the proposed tentative map is consistent with the provisions of the municipal code and NRS. There are 12 findings the Planning Commission must consider in forwarding a recommendation onto the board. Staff was able to make all findings in the affirmative and is recommending approval of the tentative subdivision map, subject to 30 conditions of approval, which are included in your staff report. Chris Baker with Manhard Consulting is here, as well as Mark Kruger representing the project. And I'm available for questions.
Questions for staff?
I have.
Commissioner Tingle.
So one of the conditions is there is not a traffic study done for this tentative subdivision map. When would a traffic study be required or done for this particular project? Would it be after what?
It's condition 19 on page 3. It would be submitted with the improvement plans.
And when would you anticipate those being done, the improvement plans? Would that be part of the subdivision map?
It would be
final?
prior to recording the final map.
So after, there wouldn't be any houses built?
Correct.
At that point in time?
Correct.
You would be doing the
Correct.
final street? Okay.
We are just addressing a tentative subdivision map at this time, so that would be done prior to the final.
Correct, and I think, and maybe Stephen Pote can speak to this better than I can, but I think the traffic study is supposed to be pretty focused on a stop sign warrant analysis.
Other questions for staff? Commissioner Eswin?
Just for clarification, this is not part of the Schulz Ranch project?
It is located within the specific plan area, but is not part of the larger project. The larger project is now 4 phases, and they're nearing completion of that. This is within the specific plan area and subject to the specific plan policies, but it is not part of the development agreement, and it is no longer part of the subdivision, the original subdivision.
So if we wanted to, just as a possibility, say to the developer that they had to improve the drainage area off of Tule Peak Drive or Circle, that wouldn't be included. We couldn't include that because it's not part of this development. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And it's not the same developer. There's no connection.
It's a different developer, you're correct.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for staff? Seeing none. The applicant? First of all, the 30 conditions as written are fine. You accept those?
Again, Chris Baker with Manhart Consulting, here on behalf of the applicant. As Heather indicated, I'm joined tonight in the audience by Mark Kruger and Ryan Kruger, both the applicants. I've got a quick PowerPoint. Some of this stuff is going to be kind of touching on things and maybe expanding on some of the stuff Heather did. To get to your first question, Mr. Chair, yes, we have read the conditions. We agree with staff's recommendation for approval and all the conditions contained in the staff report. So, like I said, some of this stuff might be a little bit redundant, so I'm just going to jump through. Project location, I think Heather went through that. Again, it's south and west of what's considered phase 3 of the Schulz Ranch project. Master plan designation, medium density residential, single family 6,000 square foot zoning. As Heather indicated, it is in what's called the Schulz Ranch specific plan area. I know there's lots of Schulz Ranch terminology going around here, and I think we might have compounded the problem by calling it Schulz Ranch 5. I'll kind of touch on the reason behind that and maybe clarify some of the points kind of moving through. It's important to point out don't have a cursor. There we go. The dark blue area is the limits of the Schulz Ranch specific plan area. It's broken down into both A and B areas. The yellow area is Area A, and that's what we're dealing with. That makes up the area that was the original Schulz Ranch tentative map. That included 5 phases. 1 through 4 is the stuff that's currently being developed by Lennar. This area was identified in the original approved tentative map as phase 5. For one reason or another, the development agreement that preserved the tentative map, this property owner opted out of that and chose to, once the specific plan was approved and the design standards were in place, zoning was in place, develop this area independently, and that's kind of where we're at now. Here's some of those development requirements that Heather touched on that we're addressing in meeting as part of this application. Variety of lot sizes. Again, all of this stuff deals specifically with Area A. Disclosure of adjacent uses. Again, we're up against some 1-acre lots to the west and to the south. So there's, horses and other things, just disclosure statements. And I think all of this was required as part of Schulz Ranch's phase 1 through 4. The varied streetscape, kind of the most important thing as part of this project is the buffer lots. That's the last item up there. The language talks about lots abutting existing residential parcels to the south and west of the project will be limited to development of 1-story homes. We are complying with that. We have a condition of approval that states such. So here's kind of the history of it. Schulz Ranch specific plan area was established to provide a framework for the incorporation of additional housing to the area. This was really based on the original Shoals Ranch map, which was approved in 2005, included 521 units. All 5 phases, again, first 4 of those phases, Lennar is developing, that was preserved via the development agreement. This portion was opted not to be preserved. The map therefore expired. Now we're back in front of you with the framework of the specific plan and the underlying zoning, which we're meeting. I think it's important to point out that Shoals Ranch actually is only, the first 4 phases only comprised of 424 units, and we're proposing 29 here, so we're at 453 total. The map, the improvement, drainage, traffic study, all of the impacts associated are all based on 521 lots. So we are technically showing a reduction. Again, and then there's the bullet that talks about in 2011, this owner, for one reason or another, opting out of that agreement. So what's before you today, like Heather touched on, 29 single-family residential lots on 7.94 acres. Here's kind of a project summary. Total acreage, 29 units. So allowable density, that's based on single-family 6,000 square foot, which allows for 7.26 units. In theory, we could have upwards of 57 units on this property. There are some buffer requirements and other stuff that don't make it feasible, but the point is, in theory, we could have more. What we're proposing is 29, which is approximately 3.65, so a little under 4 to the acre. I know parking's always big. In this case, parking's going to be handled in garages, just showing to demonstrate that we're meeting that. And then the average lot size, again, is 9465, just below 9,500 square feet. So here's the proposed site plan. I think this is important because it does overlay on what's out there now. So this is the most current area we could get. As far as the thought process here, we have some criteria as part of the specific plan. We had to have buffer lots, increased setbacks, limitation to 1 story. So on this western boundary, we have larger lots. This thing keeps moving around on me. So we have larger lots here on the west. We have larger lots here on the south. What we did on the north and the east was we lot matched, which is a typical planning term for, the goal is to have no more than 1 neighbor. You don't want smaller lots adjacent to your existing lots. So what we did was put the same size lots that were previously approved and under construction. As you see, the streets were stubbed. It's always been identified as Shoals Ranch Phase 5. Like I said, there was a previously approved tentative map identifying such. It does seem as though maybe there was some misinformation according to some of the letters that are out there and included in the staff report. And if that's the case, that's an unfortunate situation. And I encourage those residents to take it up with that developer. As we indicated, this is a different property owner, not part of that project. And I think what would be just as unfortunate is to put kind of design criteria or limit the development potential of this piece of property just based on some misinformation that was provided by something that, these property owners didn't have any part of that transaction. So that's kind of my 2 cents. With that, like I said, we're in agreement with staff's recommendation and we're available for questions.
Questions for the applicant? Commissioner Eswine.
Chris, what was the, do you have, what was the original tentative map for this area?
The original tentative, the street and lot layout was nearly identical. They had a different product type. So I believe the original was 25 total lots, but it was, like I said, it was based on a different product type at the time, so. But as far as the cul-de-sacs, the stub streets, everything else, we kept the street and lot the same. We did actually lower the site. It was, they were proposing to kind of put it a little bit more up in the air, and we actually lowered it as part of the grading proposed.
And is there any flood hazard zone in this area?
No, there's not.
Okay.
Other questions? Commissioner Tingle.
You might have answered this in your presentation, but I'm somewhat intrigued if the letters that were received by staff related to the view issues. that the larger lots on this development are abutting areas where there are no houses. So in order to maybe mitigate issues of losing their view, would it have made more sense to maybe put those larger lots? I know you're shaking your head, but I just think that, I know you said that you want to keep the lots similar to what they're abutting, but if part of the issue is view, then maybe the bigger lot sizes abutting those houses that are already there would have mitigated some of their concerns.
So, again, Chris Baker for the record. So the larger lot sizes on the western portion and the southern portion and the limitation to the one story is actually outlined in the specific plan, which is a product of Carson City's master plan. So flip-flopping those, we actually can't do that. We would require a master plan amendment to do such. So yeah, that's kind of, our hands are tied there. So that we really can't do that. I mean, I guess we could provide larger lots. Again, 3.65 to the acre is less dense than anything else in the adjacent Shoals Ranch. To make this project even remotely feasible, I mean, this is kind of where we are. Just the parameters that are approved and required as part of the specific plan takes a good chunk out of this.
I understand that, but it's not like there's never been any request to modify the master plan. So that is an option, I would assume, at some point, that if there were issues that there's always the option to modify the master plan.
There is, and I've been doing this quite a while, and in my professional history, I've never seen anyone request a master plan amendment for their project that is not necessary.
Can I add, I believe the zoning south and east is larger, 1 acre, 5, whatever, and part of that's the reason to match up for the lot size.
It's 1 acre lots to the west and to the south. And again, we've got 6,000s to the north and to the east. So the basis for it is to have compatible land uses, and that's what we're proposing.
And anyway. Other questions for the applicant? Other Commissioner Doors or just clarification? Okay. Nothing. All right, thank you. When we open this up for public comment, just to explain, normally try to keep your comments under 3 minutes. We have, and also, one shot at it. Basically, come up and state your name and make your comments. We will not answer, nor will the applicant or staff. As you make your comments, we'll make notes, and then normally at the end of the comment period, we'll try to answer what we can. So we'll open this up for public comment at this time.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
can we leave that chart up also?
Sure. Okay, thank you, Chris. If you come forward and state your name, okay. And when you push the button on, and when you see the little green light at the base, it's on. There you go, sir.
My name is Pete Baxter. It's been a long time since I've been to a meeting like this, and I simply can't hear. I have no idea what you were talking about. It's just very difficult. I turned 29 last month for the 59th year in a row, and it's taken its toll on me. The only question that I have at this point, I have no objection to the development. The only question I have is who's going to remain entitled to that drainage pond that's on the extreme east side. The reason I say that is because I granted the easement for the pipe that carries the water out of that thing. And they hit me, I'm on a well and a septic, and they hit me with I forget what they call it, but it's every 3 months. I pay them $17 for, because I'm on a well and not on city water, essentially. And if I if I contribute to that drainage pond, why do I have to pay for that? That's not really the question involved here. The agreement that we made was that they were going to give me a sewer and water stub somewhere along that adjacent line. They put in their drainage, their 30-foot drainage pipe, and put up the gates and all of that kind of stuff, but they never gave me my sewer stub. And that's part of the Schultz agreement. Whether the 8 acres out there is part of that or not is irrelevant to me. But the contract that they signed and the city accepted, and the easement accepted, states that they owe me a sewer and a water stub. I understand 119-183. I also understand that the law is liberally construed, and it leaves a lot of things open for argument and discussion. And I don't think, I guess what I'm trying to say is that the city is a part of that agreement, whether you like it or whether you don't, that we made, because they accepted that deed or dedication or gift or whatever you want to call it. If it's accepted, that means that they agree with it. So they still owe me. I haven't pushed the issue because of the fact that they went through a default there, and they almost went to sale, and it was cured, I guess, in December of that year. Would have been 08, I think. Anyway, I'm not asking you guys to, give me a sewer. I'm not asking that, but I think you ought to at least recognize the fact that it's there, and if you welch on the deal, it's as much your fault as anybody else.
Well, thank you. We'll address that at the end, and we'll probably ask for legal comment or whatever. I believe probably whoever you had the agreement with, which
Well,
I believe was Lennar Homes.
I
would
appreciate
imagine.
it, but I can't hardly hear anything.
Well, and we'll try to make sure that we can get that
It's just one
information
of
to
those
you.
things.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Want to come forward? Turn the green light will light on the base, there you go. Once the green
Okay.
light's on, you're good to go.
My name is Peter Kennedy. I live in Phase 2 of the regional development. I don't know, maybe some of you are aware of the fact that in addition to paying taxes, the owners of those properties have to pay, or supposedly have to pay, a landscape fee, which is sort of outside the tax bill. It's part of the tax bill. And I was wondering whether or not the Phase 5 will have to also pay that fee. My understanding is that there's no homeowners association, of course, that would show up in the title. But when the title examiner performed the examination, they did not come up with any provision that limited that required the owners to pay that landscape fee. My understanding is the landscape fee is for maintaining the landscaping along the racetrack drive, and there's a park there now, and I would assume it would also include the park. So I was just wondering how kosher it is. It's fairly unusual to have this fee that's usually administered through a homeowners association. a lot of people don't like home associations, so it would make the properties more saleable if there wasn't a homeowners association. So I think Lennar worked out some sort of agreement, or they agreed to something whereby they didn't have to do a homeowners association, but this fee, which is sent out on a tax bill, I'm calling it a fee because it's usually, it's like not, everyone else doesn't get it, it's not, I don't know if it's part of the tax limitations. It's not that high, it's like $240 a year, $250 a year, somewhere in that ballpark. And I don't object so much to that amount, but a lot of people are concerned that it will just it's not subject to any limitation, that next year it'll be 300, the year after that will be 400. Supposedly, I talked to someone in Parks and Recreation, and they did say that they hold up here, when they contract out those services. So they do hold, I guess, they go through the whole bidding process for the service. So that's what I'm concerned about, is whether or not this new section will be required to also pay that fee.
Other public comment on this item? Come forward if you like, sir.
Press. I think it's on. Okey doke. I'm just going to read here what I had written. I'm one of the letters that my name is John Marquez. I'm a property owner that lives at 1366 Rocky Bluff Drive. I'm the second house south of the park. We wanted to purchase a lot that had west views of the mountains. Lennar called us when one became available that would accommodate our model, the Shire. We were informed that because of the view, there would be an additional fee of $10,000 for this lot. We were also informed that the undeveloped property behind our rear fence would not be developed in our lifetime, and we're in our mid-80s. Now it's come to our attention that they will build additional homes that would affect our view of the beautiful mountains from our backyard. I'm strongly opposed of this, as you can understand, and hope there will be consideration for the 8 homes whose views will be affected if this happens. And we're here to voice our opinion, and I understand you've already mentioned that views, from what I can comprehend, don't seem to matter. But I'm going to ask you to put yourself in our position. We waited 1.5 years to move from California here to buy a home that would have these views. And when we found it and they told us, we jumped all over it. And now, less than 7 months later, they're going to build 29 homes, and I understand progress and it moves on, but whoever, and I'm not sure of this, whoever the builder or the developer is, if it's Lennar, then we shouldn't have been told what we were told if they were going to build behind us, because that's the only reason that we purchased this home. And it's going to break my heart if you allow this to happen. That's all I have to say.
Next.
Good evening. My name is Charlie Dyla. John is my next door neighbor. I have the third house from the park, directly abutting the property here. My wife and I, we have the third house from the park, and when we arrived here, I won't read from here because you already have it, and so when we moved here, we were told we realize that the people on the other side of a fence do have a right to develop it, and it would be foolish not to believe that it would come sometime. However, we're also told that the zoning at the time, while I also am very concerned with my view, this planning department should take into consideration maybe restricting the height of the houses to a single-story home. We will, and also when we purchased, when we saw the lot before, when we lived in New York at the time, we didn't watch the construction, but it's like 4 or 5 feet higher elevation. They brought in dirt on which to build our home. If you could take into consideration limiting whatever houses that are on the abutting the phase 3 where we are to at least single story, and maybe restricting the height of the construction. I know you have to take into account drainage and things like that. However, if you would put some restrictions on the height of it, that would probably do something to save some of our views in the houses that are on the western edge of this property, of the project. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any more public comment on this item? Please come forward, state your name. I think the mic's already on, I believe.
Yeah, it looks like it's on. My name's Kimberly Templeton, and I also bought a home in Phase 3. My husband and I spent over a year looking for a home. We lived on 20 acres out by Topaz, and part of my convincing him to move into a more populated area was he had several restrictions in that, being that we didn't have neighbors, we didn't have anybody behind us. When we went to Lennar Homes, Schultz Ranch, that's what we were told. Again, we put a deposit down on a house in another community. I was called by Vicki Carolla from Schultz Ranch saying, hey, I have a house that fell out of whatever deposit it was in. I'm the one right next to the park. I do not have a neighbor on any side of me. John, who just spoke, is my only neighbor, and there's no one behind me. We were very excited, went down that day, put a deposit down, and again, we're told, just as my neighbors John and Charlie, that no one would build behind us, that it was some type of a private place, that there would never be anybody built back there. We went in April, put our deposit down in July. We went through all the pre-approval process. We signed paperwork. We watched our house being built step by step by step, going into the office continuously, looking at the models and talking with Vicki and Janice. And at the time, there was a gentleman there named Tim, who was also one of the people that worked on the houses, part of the construction team or contracting team. Every single one of them assured us that no homes would be built behind us. And I understand this gentleman and, they're wanting to build there. However, every single person, I went from door to door in our community with this letter after we received it, and not one person was told that there would ever be homes built behind us. Every single one of my neighbors has been told, we will never build there. This is not part of it. And as the Planning Commission, I don't know if you go and audit some of these or go in and talk to them and find out what their map looks like and what they're selling, but that is what they're selling. I too paid a $10,000 premium for my lot for not having the view behind it. And I understand that that's not something that you all can do anything about, but as a resident and somebody who saves up and spends a long time looking for this specific type of house to retire in, as all my neighbors are doing the same thing. We all want to retire there. We all wanted to lower our fences, looking up at the mountains, looking up at the beautiful scenery that we all move and live in this beautiful place for. And then I've been in my house for 9 months now, and I get a letter in the mail telling me, hey, nothing that we've told you is true. We're going to be building behind you. And it does appear that some type of construction's already started. So we've seen a lot of dirt being moved, a lot of different activity happening behind us, which is pretty alarming when you get a letter saying that it's tentative. So it looks as though something's moving forward already. So I would, my plea is that it isn't approved, with all respect to, different construction teams. And can we know who the builder is that purchased this or that's building there?
At this time, I doubt there is a builder.
Okay.
The end?
At the
ma'am?
end, okay. Yeah, so that's my whole statement, is that it's just, it's very alarming to everyone in the community when you do spend so much money on a home and watch it being built and dream about your retirement and being part of it, and then you find out that there potentially are going to be 1- and 2-story homes built behind you, obstructing everything that you planned on. Thank you.
More public comment on this item? Come forward and state your name, please.
My name's Alan Murph. I live at 1674 Tule Peak Circle, so the lot that's being proposed to be developed is directly behind us, and I just wanted to come forward now because I wanted to let you know that they have started to clear sagebrush, and they've moved a lot of dirt onto the property that we're talking about. And what they did is there was property right across the street from us, and they were moving dirt there from other lots in the 1 through 4 that are being developed. And so they're starting to develop the lots across from us. So they've taken the dirt that they piled across the street and they've cleared sagebrush, and they're now moving dirt into this tentative development that you're talking about, which, as the woman who just spoke said, it doesn't appear to be tentative. It appears to be that they're going forward on at least putting dirt there, a lot of dirt. So that's a concern. So as far as Dawn shared too, I would hope that when you stand on our fence line and look into the property, it's at a lower elevation. So I would hope and I'm wondering, are they going to raise the elevation of that piece of property to develop the new homes on?
And we'll address these questions.
Okay, so I would hope that they would consider that, and plus at least limiting that piece of property to 1-story development, so that, I understand that you don't have control over views, but I think there needs to be some accountability here towards what we were told as buyers of this property, that Lennar had no interest in developing this property, and they used that as a sales pitch to get the people that moved into this property to buy that. And I would hope that there would at least be a reprimand process to the developers in the area. And I appreciate all the work that you guys do, and I'm sure most of it's, you guys work hard. I would just hope that there'd be some accountability, and that's your responsibility as city planners to make sure that the people that our city is being planned ethically. That would be my concern. And I understand that we're moving forward and that there is going to be progress, as Dawn shared it as well. So we're right there where we're on the corner of Chalk Bluff and Wheeler Peak. And so we're going to be mainly be impacted by the increased traffic going into that area. Because, when we were told that there would be no development back there, that Chalk Bluff was going to dead end right there. So we have a neighbor to our north, and then us, and then we're right there by the park. And that whole drainage situation, which you may want to look in, is a mess as well, because that's been standing water all summer long. It does not drain, and so we've had mosquitoes, a large number of mosquitoes, things to look into that I think that developers need to be held to. I appreciate the fact that they're in this business to make money, but I think that they have to do it ethically as well. And as I said, I think that that's all our responsibilities to make sure that it happens. So thank you for everything that you're doing, for giving us this opportunity, and I just that's my comments on it. Thank you.
Before we continue, I'd just like to state again, I stated at the start of this, okay? The issue is with Lennar Homes. We have no control over what he told or what you were told or whatever. But again, we'll continue this and try to address the answers at the end. But again, you're coming to us or to the staff, and whatever you were told, and if you were charged money for this and have it in writing, I would think legally you would have recourse back on the builder. But I mean, anyway, we can continue, you know. Any more public comment on this? Please come forward, ma'am, sir. You can come up together, sure.
My name is Lisa Nyson, and we also have a piece of property that butts up on this proposed development. And I'm quickly realizing that Lennar played us for suckers, and there was lack of ethics and integrity, which you have nothing to do. But when you are saying that it's proposed and it is not Lennar, the barbed wire fence is down. There is Lennar equipment, Lennar materials, and Lennar employees that are on this proposed site already.
Ma'am, would
So
you address us, please, not the applicant? Just-
Sorry.
Thank you.
This whole thing is new to me. It's not something I've done before, so educating is fine. So I kind of feel again that we're being played. When you see this Lennar activity back there and they are saying, no, it's not Lennar, that's the builder. I don't know if you have answers to that, yes or no. And so moving forward, this drainage property, it's a mess. We've had one whole back wall on our house covered one day with mosquitoes. And we've talked to Lennar about this. I'm not sure if this particular drainage site is what the city is eventually taking care of. The park that's on the other end, it's my understanding that is city. But we have a son that's had a recent heart transplant. And for any of us, West Nile is an issue. This needs to be addressed, and soon. I've noticed that the water kind of waxes and wanes in that particular. There's all kinds of front loaders. I don't understand why someone can't be tapped on the shoulder and ask for dirt to be moved in, whether or not it's the city or Lennar, and get rid of that standing water. Or abatement, surely there's city abatement that does something to put in the chemical that's okay for wildlife. And my other concern was I'm getting used to acceptance of the view being a non sequitur for the committee. It's Lennar, but the habitat, I'm watching quail and jackrabbits and cottontails and coyotes just kind of scrambling in the last couple of weeks. So I don't know. But my issue is this drainage thing is a serious problem, and it's just been allowed to go for months.
Thank you.
My name's Jan Nyssen. I'm also concerned because we're to the east side of this, proposed development. I understand that you brought up the point about the master plan and the sizes of lots. And the developer here is saying, hey, we want to reflect lot sizes that are kind of like similar to what we're going to be building next to. And I also know that you guys take into account the impact of any new development on development that is already there. So what I would like you to consider, if this goes forward, is please do consider making the lot sizes both larger on that western side and the southern side and the eastern side, because I would think that you could put in larger lots on both the eastern and western sides and still be, adherent to the master plan that was there. It would seem to me that if you had larger lot sizes abutting, that would move development a little farther away from the property that's already there, and it would mitigate some of the concerns of the homeowners in that area.
Drainage is a big issue, so
you
much so
mention
that
that?
we
Yes,
put in a French drain. So I'm not sure what the grade is going to be when these new houses come in. But if the future property buyers don't do due diligence like some of us with the French drain, it just seems to me like there's going to be more problems and more issues with drainage out there. Okay?
Thank you very much.
More public comment on, you've already been up, sir. Any other additional public comment, new comment, please? Seeing none, can we bring it back to staff and us to try to answer some of these questions? Commissioner Doors?
I've got several questions. Thank you, everybody who spoke. First of all, the drainage pond that everyone's speaking of, do we know where in relation to that proposed site plan exactly it is? That's where I thought too.
Yeah.
So that is concerning to me, especially because it's already backed up. I mean, looking on my number one thing on this that I looked at after reading through the letters and stuff was the hydrology report, and it is FEMA zoned X, so I had to look exactly what that meant. But it means that it's not a flood zone, but everything drains right, according to that hydrology report, right at that drainage pond. So it is a little concerning adding, you put that development in there and they've got to meet all the standards and stuff within that white square. But when the water leaves that white square, it concerns me that it's going to go right to that drainage pond. So is there something that you guys already have in place regarding that? That would be my first question.
This is Stephen Pote with Development Engineering for the record. So currently that is under construction, that part of the Shoals Ranch Phase 3. They still have some work to do. They've been working on the park to the north of that you can see in the top of that picture, which is also a detention basin. So they were working on that first to get that finished, and then they were going to move down to that part. The improvements include landscaping and a concrete swale on the bottom, which will help move that water to the low flow outlet. There's also a sedimentation part to help get sand out, which will still have standing water when there's flows, but it won't be as much of a mess as it is right now.
Okay, so that's comforting regarding that. And to answer the concern before, Carson City does put stuff in the standing water areas to help abate mosquitoes and control the West Nile risks. The second question I had, well, it's a little complicated, but that sewer water stub, I'm not even gonna touch on that. Forget it. The moving the dirt and stuff, that is concerning to me personally as a commissioner basis. There is this thing where people start just moving stuff and doing stuff before things have been approved, and that I think flies in the face of regulation and what we are supposed to do here. But besides that, I definitely understand how that can happen, and I definitely understand that, I just kind of want to state that for the record. Aside from that, as far as the views and everything, I agree with the chair that it sounds like if everybody got that in writing, you would probably have legal recourse. That's no way legal advice, but the problem is we cannot base our decision, speaking to your point, sir, yeah, we do have control over it, but we cannot base our decision based on what you guys are talking about. It wouldn't be fair if you were in a different position here. It wouldn't be fair to you, and we would treat you the same way we're treating them. We can't get involved in that as much as serious as that is. So
Commissioner Doris?
Those are my concerns. Yeah.
Thank you. Can we get staff to respond? I think we'll answer some of these.
I don't think I had any other questions in there
Okay,
except
great.
the one that was already answered.
Great, thank you, sir.
So I was just rambling. Thank you.
No, you weren't.
Thank you.
One quick question. Shores Ranch Development, are there any two-story homes in there? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, there's a handful.
And we were told that the rumor is that they were planning on putting 2 stories in this development.
Okay, sir, we're going to try to answer the questions you all brought up, okay? So if you're not sitting at the mic, please, thank you. Staff?
Steven with Carson, Development Engineering again. I can speak to the grading that it sounds like is happening. I think this is the first any staff have heard of that. Hope and I were looking at each other during public comment. So we'll investigate that tomorrow and get code enforcement involved if that's what's going on. Clearing and grubbing, they're allowed to do without a permit. They shouldn't be moving soil and doing grading. They can do 5 yards is the max what they can do without a permit. So it sounds like it's more than that. But and then on the sewer and water stub to the gentleman's property just west of the basin, Lennar did at one point show that in their improvement plans. It did not meet city standards. And also, since there was no proposed development there, we said that at this point, since it didn't look like there was room to fit it per city standards and that there was no development proposed at the time, we weren't going to allow those stubs over to that property.
The gentleman is very hard of hearing. Could you get with him either during and after or make arrangements to let him know what's going on with that, please, for us?
Yeah.
Thank you. Heather?
So I think the next question that came up was regarding the landscape maintenance district. There is a landscape maintenance district for the rest of Shoals Ranch. In my discussions with folks at Parks and Rec, they would not be requiring this property to participate in the landscape maintenance district. We've touched on the issue with views, so I won't go there again. And let's see. I think that's.
Mosquitoes, tell them all.
So we can talk with vector control about the mosquito issue out there to address that, but.
And is that issue, that's not on this property, that's on existing Schultz Ranch property?
It's on a separate property,
Right.
but we can talk with vector control about the issue that's been raised.
And do we know for a fact that this dirt moving and all is occurring on this property, or is it still on?
I think we have to go out and look. This is a first that staff has heard of it.
Right.
And I believe staff was out there last week or the week before.
I'm thinking it's probably still on part of the Schultz Ranch area, whatever. That's not.
A quick question, would it be possible to add as a condition, and I didn't catch what you said the program was, but the landscaping maintenance program, would it be possible to add as a condition that these lots are included in paying for that, considering it's all part of the same master site plan? It can be a different development all day long, but it's still in that bigger yellow square that's not up there right now. And the question was for city staff.
Do we know what that covers, or can you explain that to us, please?
Okay. A landscape maintenance district, let me just give you some background on that. I'm looking at Paul, I'm sure he knows it better than I do. Essentially, what that does is it allows a government agency to essentially assess properties for a proportion, not the 100%, but for a proportion of landscape amenities that are on their property. Shoals Ranch includes a landscape maintenance district. As far as and you all have seen a lot of plans that have included landscaped areas, parks, open space. And in my tenure here, we've never proposed a landscape maintenance district. During my tenure, we've always said that an HOA or a similar entity has to maintain those areas. The reason being a landscape maintenance district is essentially managed by the city and subsidized by the city. And that's why we have not been using that tool in the last few years. In the case of this particular tentative map, I don't believe there are any open space areas that would be subject to maintenance by an HOA or a landscape maintenance association. And so I think to amend the landscape maintenance district that's in place and associated with Shoals Ranch to include a property that doesn't have any open space areas in it or landscaped areas in it, I think it's a little bit of a stretch.
Lee Plemmel, Community Development Director. I think we don't really know the answer to the question of can we include them. I think we'd have to get with the DAs. And I'm looking for Parks and Rec in here, so I'm not sure exactly why they didn't request that it be included. They may have some additional information as to why not, but it's something we can look into now. I guess I'll mention now, this is called a tentative map. That's a term that's used in NRS. The process is to get approval of the map on paper. That's called a tentative map. It's not recorded until it's a final map. The tentative map, Planning Commission's making a recommendation. This is going to go for the Board of Supervisors for final approval. So I think between now and the Board of Supervisors meeting, I said final approval even, not final map approval. They have final approval on the tentative map, that application that we're reviewing. So that is something I think we could look in and have the answer for, and you can make a recommendation and your thoughts on that, but I think it's something that we need to find the legal ability to do that if that's the direction you want to go.
Mr. Chair. On 2 points. Let's talk about the maintenance district. Even this project was originally part of the Shoals Ranch, and it just happened to be taken out. I think that there's good reason to include it in the existing landscape maintenance district. These people are going to use that park. These people are going to be using Racetrack Drive. That's the only way in and out of this property. I think that there's a good justification for including them in the landscape maintenance district and putting them on the same footing as everyone else in the Shoals Ranch development. The second point that I'd like to make is that I'd like to look into the possibility of decreasing the front setbacks on Wheeler Drive and increasing the rear setbacks so that the houses can be moved further from the existing residences there on Rocky Bluff, and also limiting the height to a single-story home and no more than.
Please.
And I don't have a actual height limitation because I don't know right off the top of my. I just know that a single-story home is usually not more than 18 feet. So I would like to make that as a recommendation for the board to consider when we get further along on this. Thank you.
A question I just want to know on the adjoining lots. I can't tell from that picture how many of those are two-story.
I believe at this point, they don't have that information. Oh, the adjoining.
Where this is adjoining.
You want me to?
There are none.
None of the existing adjoining this property are 2 stories.
Okay. Further, Commissioner Preston.
Yeah, first of all, as being somebody that has sold houses for 43 years, I am very disappointed in Lennar Homes on telling you guys that there's a view corridor in this area. I find that very disconcerting, and I think you need to take it up with them. In regards to this development, one of my concerns is that we stipulate that there's 3 different types of homes that they have in this development. And so you can only take 3 different homes, shake them up, and put them in a certain way. What's going to end up happening is if all these lots all have to be single story, and they're in those 6 lots that abut your property, they're all going to look the same. So I think that's one of the things that I'm looking at going, okay, I don't know how that can happen. one of the deals is that Wheeler Peak and also Tule Peak Court, both of those were butt in. So this showed that this was development previously, that they had intended to develop it. I don't think at any time anybody could construe this as a green space and that knew that it was going to happen at some time, 9 months in the future, 10 years in the future, but it still happened. So I'm sorry that that happened, but at the same point, this is an infill project that actually has water and sewer in it, and the infrastructure's been put there, so it makes sense for this development, as far as I'm concerned. In regards to the landscape thing, I believe I am vehemently against them. However, I do know that Schultz Ranch did this initially in 2005, and that they stopped doing this, but I think that this development should actually be part of that because they are part of the neighborhood park. They also have the infrastructures and the roads to it. So on that one, I'm going to have to concur on that. But as far as changing the different houses and so forth and the setbacks and changing the development on an infill project that actually is less homes than is originally done, I'm just kind of taken back. Like I said, I think the problem is with Lennar, so.
And one question we didn't address, and I think you did in your presentation, the fact that it is going to be lower. You were not, right? Was that not what you said, sir?
The original tentative map actually had it significantly higher as far as the proposed grading than we are proposing now. The finished floor elevations are lower than what's existing now. There's probably gonna have to, I don't know what the existing grade is, what that base elevation is, but looking at the proposed finished floors and the existing finished floors for the surrounding properties, they're within a foot or two, and I believe all of ours are below, yeah.
Commissioner Doors.
Commissioner Doors, for the record, to Commissioner Preston's point, I think that is a good point. It's a concern. You don't want cookie cutter homes, especially in a nice development that does have larger than average or larger than surrounding lot sizes. But I also think that it's important. I agree. I do agree with Commissioner Eswine's suggestion that we should increase it, and I think that they don't have any models made yet, so it does give them an opportunity, or at least finalized yet. I'm sure they're in drawings somewhere. But it does give them an opportunity to come up with a couple different elevation options, structural options that can be changed to fix that problem of, repetitive design. The floor plans can even be exactly identical, and we can change the structural options. So I think that's an overcomable concern that maybe we should also address, but I don't know. That's it. Thank you.
Commissioner Baker.
Chris Baker, for the record, I'd like to explore, Paul, my concern on reducing the front setback. I understand the intent, but we still have a front face for a garage of 20 feet. If we can't park cars in our driveway, it's very difficult to meet the intent of a driveway. Obviously, we can have house forward design, but the setbacks incorporate house forward design. The front yards are actually only 15 feet. I just don't see, I understand the intent, but reducing the front setback doesn't solve that problem. All it does is create a driveway, or, maybe you don't want units that are 5 feet off the road, right? You don't want a livable space 5 feet off the road. Even if it's 10, then you have an odd-shaped unit. So that my
It's not
concern
unheard
would be-
of in the Carson City area, though, to have those smaller front setbacks, especially in neighborhoods.
But it is unheard of
there's
not to have a driveway that's not usable.
You have garages to meet your parking requirement. You don't need the driveway to meet your parking requirement.
Yeah, they require.
The driveway, I believe.
Yeah.
Can you clarify that for us?
Regardless, to touch back on something you said, though, you said that you're already kind of doing lot forward design on this.
No, we're actually not doing any design. I think it's important to clarify some things. I hear a lot of Lennar frustration. These guys aren't Lennar. They have nothing to do with Lennar. I have nothing to do with Lennar. I understand your frustration. I get it. It sounds like there were some miscommunications, some misrepresentations, and I'd be frustrated also. I think it's a very dicey precedent to set to require a property owner to limit the design constraints and limit the developable ability of someone's piece of property based on someone else lying to somebody. I mean, that's.
Hold on 1 second.
goofy.
Let me clarify something that you said earlier. Can you please clarify for us? You said something about lot forward. I thought that I understood it. Apparently I did not. Can you clarify that, please?
I stated that the specific plan has setback requirements that allow for house forward design. So it allows for 15 foot to the house, but requires 20 foot to the garage. So if we were to move the setbacks forward, we would not be in a situation where we could provide a driveway, which Carson City requires us to do. So moving the setbacks forward don't really achieve the goal, is what I'm saying. You get 10 more feet in the back, but you don't get a driveway.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Eschwein.
last month, we approved a subdivision project, and you were the representative for the developer. We changed the setback on a whole street. And we changed the front setback and we changed the rear setback to accommodate exactly this situation. Don't tell me we can't do it again. If you can change the design of a house.
Hold on a second, Paul, let me speak too. If we're going to talk about that, we were requesting a special use permit to increase height to 3 stories adjacent to 1-story homes. We volunteered to increase the setback. And the setback we were talking about was an additional 10 feet for 61 foot. We're talking about adjacent homes to adjacent homes. They were all approved on the same tentative map. We've matched lot sizes. I don't know if they're going to be 1 or 2 stories, but I think it is very unfair to limit a property owner's development potential based on misrepresentations by an adjacent property owner. That's my statement. That's it.
I'm just saying we did exactly the same thing last month.
I just have
Commissioner
an
Tingle.
observation, sorry. I do believe that there is a development on the west side of Carson City that, if I recall correctly from times driving through it, walking through it, that the driveways do not support a truck, standard-sized truck, parked in the driveway, that it does not encroach on the sidewalk. So the issue is not driveway length necessarily. It is just that they need to have a garage, correct? You have, Carson City requires you to have a garage.
Stated that there is a requirement for driveway length. Can we let staff clarify that?
That's fine. Go, because when did that requirement come in? Because I'm pretty sure this particular subdivision doesn't have that, so maybe it was grandfathered in, and so they didn't have a driveway limitation. I don't know. But I was just kind of trying to clarify that in my head.
Yeah, so I didn't mean, we don't have a requirement for a driveway. You could have, but when you have a driveway, it needs to be big enough for a vehicle. We have examples of old subdivisions where cars hang out on the sidewalk. Those are things we don't want to repeat in new approvals, of having a driveway that's not big enough for the car, so it either hangs out into the street or hangs over the sidewalk. We do have examples where there's alleys, maybe in some cases streets, where there is alleys in particular I could think of where there's no driveway and there's just a garage. So an alternative would be, let's put the garage right on the street and no driveway. Then it's really clear that you can't park in front of it. You have to put your car in the garage, but that's not a single family. That's not a setback you typically see. That's not a design you typically see in a single family subdivision. So I just wanted to clarify what I meant by that and what I said about driveways. And it is a requirement. There are setbacks established. I mean, maybe we can amend them through this map, but there are setbacks established through the specific plan for this property.
But it is possible to design a house with the garage set back from the front of the house. And the house comes forward. That's all I'm saying, is that you could still have your 20-foot driveway. You could bring your house forward and have your garage not be in the setback.
And that's already allowed within the specific plan. It's actually already being built in Shoals Ranch, and we envision that happening here. Again,
Well, then, so would you guys would you object to us adding it as a condition?
It's already allowed.
What Commissioner Eswine suggested about changing the setbacks, since you were already planning on doing it?
Mr. Chair, before Chris Baker answers that question, I think I need to bring something to the commissioner's attention.
Please.
The specific plan already does what Commissioner Eswine has suggested. If you compare the setbacks outlined in the specific plan against the setbacks for the base zoning, your front setback is at 15, whereas the base zoning would be 20. So where are we going forward? 5 feet. Your rear setback in the specific plan is 15, whereas in the base zoning it's 10. So we're bumping it forward in the rear. So the specific plan does the very thing you're suggesting. And what the specific plan says is that the garage is at 20, the very thing you just said, the garage can be farther back than the house. So the specific plan essentially has supplemented, if you will, or superseded the base zoning setbacks in the exact way the commissioner's suggesting.
Thank you for that clarification. But that brings up another point. You've just said that the specific plan requirements are required on this project. Let's make the specific plan requirements for the landscape district a requirement for this project also.
They got the.
hold on,
She wanted me that is not a specific plan requirement. That was a subdivision requirement through the development agreement.
Okay.
Please, yes, sir.
I think I might make this a little
Mr. Chair,
easier.
Ben Johnson, Deputy District Attorney for the record. I just wanted to make a comment on the landscape maintenance district. So it's allowed in statute by NRS 278.4787, and as Hope kind of explained, essentially what it is that in lieu of creating an HOA to maintain, and it's listed in the statute, landscaping, public lighting, security walls, or trails, parks, and open space on that property, the developer can request essentially the governing body, so that would be the city, to assume the maintenance for that. So instead of having an HOA, it's actually the Parks Department that maintains that property, and then they contract it out, and they bill the owners, the homeowners that are within that landscape district. And so there, in our code, it does allow for the creation. However, it has to go through several steps, including it has to receive approval by the Parks Director. And it's my understanding that the current Parks Administration does not want to go down this route because of the strain on current parks resources in the city. That doesn't mean that it can't be suggested, but preliminarily looking at the statute and the code, I don't know that you can force this developer into an already existing landscape maintenance district, whereas Hope said there's not really any common space or open space or common areas on the property to maintain. I understand that those residents may use the neighboring parks, but my preliminary opinion would be that I don't believe that it can be done as a condition.
Mr. Chairman.
Go use that park if I wanted to, even though I live over on Fremont Street. So, I mean, I've not heard of this before. Do we know how many more, it was the Schurz Ranch one in '05? Is that one of the few that's ever been done? Do you know, sir?
It's a long time.
Yeah, but I mean, and Rec has expressed they don't want to go down this road.
But Parks and Rec is not interested in taking on any additional parklands. They're not taking on any additional parklands. I don't believe that there's anything in NRS that would prohibit annexation of this additional property within the district.
Mr. Chair, I think I might make this a little easier. In discussion with the applicant, they're okay with the addition of a condition that they will be included in the LMD if legally acceptable. I think that makes sense. I don't disagree with the fact that there is only a few ways in here. They do go by the entry monument. Obviously, they're going to utilize the park. Again, I don't know if that is something that can be legally done, but we would be willing to entertain a condition that if legally feasible, yeah, we would agree to enter into the existing LMD.
Hope, can you kind of,
I just want clarification that the applicant is volunteering to add this property to the existing LMD for Schultz
I think
Ranch.
he is,
If legally
if it's legal.
allowable.
Are you volunteering
Yes.
this? Thank you.
Yes. Hold on, it gets better.
Okay.
Wait for it. We are also willing to limit the eastern units to 1 story. So there's 6 additional units there that currently, according to the specific plan, are not required to be 1 story. I don't know what that height requirement is, but we wouldn't want an 18-foot, that really limits, I don't think the 1 story is, I think it's 26 or whatever it is. But we would be willing to entertain a condition limiting the eastern property to 1 story.
Okay. Commissioner
For the record,
Commissioner Doris, I'm sorry.
what'd you call me? For what it's worth, and to the audience, I haven't been doing this terribly long, but that's kind of a first, and I think you could tell by Chris's administration of that news. So for what it's worth, I think that's really a great move on the part of the developer.
And
You know, everyone sitting on this board feels for you folks for what you were told or misled to. I mean, we've all bought homes, we bought cars. I mean, they're gonna tell us what they gotta tell us sometimes to try to make a sale. And it's very kind of what they're willing to do to make up for something that was wrong. You were wrong, not by these people or by this board or by the staff. It's by the people that sold you your homes. And I still would look to recourse to go back to them, especially you people that paid extra money for supposedly a premium view. Anyway.
Are we done?
I have one more comment.
Commissioner Eswat.
I just want, is there any way that we can get, I know we can't tie this development to the Phase 3 problem of drainage, but is there any way we can get them to move forward on that? Because it's just a mud hole.
Stephen Poteo, Development Engineering for the record. So they are moving forward with, so there's, I guess, 2 issues. There's drainage overall, which is more complicated, and then this basin in particular. I can commit to talking to the developer and seeing what kind of timeframe we can get on moving forward with that. It is bonded currently, so the city does have that surety that it'll be finished, and they have deadlines on the bond. So as far as forcing Lennar to finish it in a particular timeframe, I can't commit to that. But other than the timeframe on the bond, which at the time they signed it, I think is 18 months. So we could be close to that.
How close are they to build out? I mean, wouldn't there be wouldn't things have to be done before it is built out?
You remember what we stopped them at for?
Schultz.
Yeah, remember what we stopped Lennar at because of the park?
Okay, they got quite a bit.
Do you remember what's left? Okay. I was just talking to Hope. It sounds like we got about 260 out of 400 are built. Mm-hmm.
I hope they aren't still telling people they can have view lots. Or sewer stubs, yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Borders.
I'd like to make a comment and then a motion. The comment is that, and I feel also for these people, obviously the people that sold you your property said, we will never build there because they'd already sold the property. So they didn't lie to you, they just didn't tell you the truth. And I feel for you. You know, they said, well, we'll never do that, and they won't. Somebody else might, and somebody else is trying to. And having said that, I would move to recommend to the Board of Supervisors approval of the tentative subdivision map TSM 19-124, Schultz Ranch Phase 5, based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval in the staff report, including number 31, which says that houses on the east side will be only 1 story in height. And number 32 is that no. Number 32 is that the developer volunteered to enter into the maintenance district, if legally.
Can be done legally.
Yeah.
Can I modify 31?
Sure.
And actually add that to condition number 29? It already has the limitation for the south
okay.
and west.
Of course.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay,
thank you.
okay.
Thank you for finding that. That's
Mr.
my-
Chair, for the benefit of the record going forward when this is in writing, could each of those start with the words based on the voluntary offer made by the applicant on the record?
Yes,
Certainly.
that's my motion.
I will second that motion.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Break?
We will take a break.
Who are you?
I'm Stan, I work for.
Oh, okay.
Oh, goodness, where's my, I threw my agenda away.
It's right there.
Where? We'll be taking the next two items together. E5 TSM-19-126 for possible action, discussing and possible action regarding a request for a tentative subdivision map to create 51 condominium units on a 3-acre parcel on property zone multifamily apartment located on the northeast corner of East Roland Street and Oak Street, APN 009-197-02. In E6, SUP-19-125 for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding a request for a special use permit to construct 51-unit condominium development on property zone multifamily apartment located on the northeast corner of East Roland Street and Oak, APN 009-197-02. Hope?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Because this is a condominium complex, per Carson City Municipal Code 17.17, it requires both a tentative map and a special use permit. This will be two separate actions by the commission and two sets of findings. The applicant is proposing 51 units consisting of 17 threeplexes on a 3-acre site. The access will be from Oak Street. Each unit will have a 2-car garage, and the garage access will be from the interior roadway system. The plan includes 5,117 square feet of common open space and 17,925 square feet of private open space. The site includes 20 on-site guest parking spaces. Each building will be 2 stories with 2 3-bedroom units and 1 2-bedroom units. Building materials are proposed to be a stucco base with horizontal cement fiber siding as an accent, composite shingle roofing, and white vinyl windows. There are 3 different color schemes proposed. I'll just show you those. The 2-bedroom units will have a 2nd-story deck, and the other units will have patios. Per the Municipal Code 17.07, you have various findings to make on a tentative map. I'd like to speak to 2 of those findings. The finding number 4 speaks to the availability and accessibility of public services. We did reach out to the school district, and the school district stated that they remain concerned about capacity, and they've advised that for every 100 new homes, they expect 30 new students. With most of the schools now at capacity and limited capital funding for new facilities, it is concerned that it cannot rezone its way out of the problem. It is doing its utmost to prepare for growth within its means. In terms of our Parks Department, the Parks Department did advise that Ross Gold Park is within walking distance, but would like to review on-site amenities to ensure they meet the needs of the residents and they do not create the need for additional amenities at Ross Gold Park. And in terms of the transportation network, it is available and accessible. However, given the use in the traffic patterns anticipated, we anticipate an impact at the intersection of Appian Way and South Carson Street. Therefore, the staff is recommending that the applicant pay its pro rata share toward the cost of a traffic signal or device at that intersection. That's a condition of approval very similar to what you handled with the Cochise apartment complex, where as developments come through that are going to further impact that intersection at Appian and South Carson Street, the staff is recommending that developers pay their pro rata share towards the cost of that facility. Finding number 6 talks about conformity with the zoning ordinance and the land use elements of the master plan. If you reviewed Municipal Code 1717, you'll see for the condominium complexes, there's a lot of specific physical standards that are required, and I've gone through those in the staff report. I want to highlight just a couple of these. In terms of lighting, the applicant did provide a lighting cut sheet. However, it's not clear to me that that's dark sky compliant. It would depend on how you oriented it. So I am recommending a condition of approval that the applicant demonstrate that all lighting will comply with the city's lighting standards. In terms of fencing, This is a corner lot, so since it's a corner lot, the height of the street side, which would be Roland Street fencing, I'll go to the site plan, cannot exceed 3 feet in height within 5 feet of the property line. The applicant is proposing to put in a 4-foot solid wall with a 2-foot rail mounted to the top of it, so that would yield a height of 6 feet. I do anticipate the applicant may come forward with a special use permit request to have the taller wall, wall/rail, but that is not before the commission today. But right now, what I'm asking is that at the time of construction plan, they demonstrate compliance with the city's fence regulations. So that means they either bump it in 5 feet, or they shrink it down to 3 feet, or they obtain a special use permit that authorizes them to have this 6-foot combination wall fence on the property line. But that would be another day. In terms of landscaping, I am requesting that they submit a detailed landscape plan at the same time of site improvement permit. Open space, I want to speak to open space. The applicant has provided open space calculations, but I don't believe those calculations take into account the dimensional criteria. For example, you can't include certain areas that have a dimension of less than 15 linear feet. So at the time of site improvement permit, I'm recommending that the applicant provide an exhibit that demonstrates exactly what's contributing to the open space requirement and demonstrating that they are meeting the required amount of open space. I did run the numbers myself on the site plan, recognizing the limitations in terms of dimensional, it has to be at least 15 feet, and I do believe this is in compliance. Going to the special use permit, section 180280.5 talks about the 7 findings of fact for a special use permit. The commission needs to make each of those findings in the affirmative. I only want to talk about one of those findings tonight, and that's finding number 2, which addresses neighborhood compatibility. If you had a chance to go out to the site, you'll see it's interesting. On the other side of Oak, you have some commercial uses, but you then have a single-family residential house. And then a little on the corner, you have the multifamily. On one side of this property, you have multifamily, but then across Roland, you have single-family 1-acre lots. So it really is a mixed area. And similar to what I've said often about the area in the southwest corner of the city, this area is similar in that it's developed to the extent it's developed at really low intensity level with single-family homes on 1-acre lots. I have the master plan. You'll see on the master plan designation, this area south of Schneider, east of Oak and north of the freeway is designated for multifamily or high-density residential. A couple of years ago, and I think some of the commissioners were sitting on the commission, this church property, which we're looking at today, was rezoned to multifamily primarily because of the master plan designation and the anticipation that with the connection of the freeway, this area will go to multifamily. That's the orange that you see on the screen. The red, which is right on the other side of Oak, is community regional commercial, so that's anticipated to go to the non-residential uses. So this really is right on the edge of that area. So although we do have the single family right across the street on Roland, I do find that it's a mixed neighborhood when you look at land uses. You already have high density established in this area adjacent to this property and across the street. So I am finding for neighborhood compatibility. And with that said, staff has been able to make the 7 required findings in the affirmative, and we are recommending approval of the tentative map, or that the commission recommend approval to the Board of Supervisors of the tentative map, and that the commission approve the special use permit. Rachel Kreider with Resource Concepts is present with Frank Saletta and Roger Renfer. And Jeff Frame, the architect, is present. So I'm happy to answer questions, or I can turn it over to the applicant and their team.
Questions for staff? Commissioner Tingle?
So is the assumption that the access to this development is going to be strictly off of Roland onto Oak, or is there anticipation that it will come off of Clearview onto Oak? In which case, I don't know if you've been on that street lately, but it's interesting in the number of vehicles parked on Oak off of Clearview. Just,
Okay. Stephen Potay can probably speak specifically to the traffic analysis that was done. I will just mention that the driveways are on Oak, that half-street improvements are being required on Oak with a sidewalk and on-street parking, and that on-street, a 26-foot section of Roland will need to be built to include a sidewalk, and both will be curb and gutter as well. So your observation is interesting, that I think what you're pointing out is that these streets are built to a certain extent to a rural standard. Whereas as land redevelops, you often read in your conditions of approval about half-street improvements with curb and gutter and sidewalk and bike. I think there's a bike lane on Oak. And so you'll see the transition of the roadway system from a rural standard to a more urban standard. And I'll let Stephen talk about the traffic patterns.
Stephen Potay, Development Engineering. So yeah, the traffic study did contemplate the grand majority of the traffic going up Oak to Snyder, which is the street section that will be fully built out with this project with the half-street improvements that are being required. We also gave extra attention to East Roland just because as you've seen, I'm sure it's not much of a street section to speak of. Fire requires a 20-foot section. Our development standards require a half street, which for this could be as small as a 15-foot wide, so we'd have to meet that fire of 20. But we are requiring them to go up to 26, which is larger than what you'd see in like one of those small townhome PUDs, but not as big as the full urban street section. But just because we know there are other homes using that street section, we wanted to go a little bit beyond what the standard requires there for that street section.
okay, my concern, the section of road I am thinking about on Oak is off of Clearview, southbound on Oak. And I've had a number of occasions to take a individual out there to get some repair work done on various vehicles, and there are all sorts of various vehicles parked all sorts of places on Oak and Roventini, and I'm just wondering, is there going to be sidewalk and gutter on that section of Oak between Roland, Roventini, and Clearview?
Stephen with Development Engineering again. So the project is south of Snyder, so we didn't contemplate sidewalk that far north of the project. But also I'll add to that the transportation department is requiring participation in a cost share for a signal at Appian, which would divert more of the traffic out to Carson Street before getting up to that section of Oak.
Other questions for staff? Commissioner Eschwein.
Because this project is going to be utilized or in close proximity to Roscoe Park, is there any consideration of requiring a signalized crosswalk somewhere in this vicinity to accommodate pedestrian traffic over there?
That hasn't been contemplated at this time. Talking with Lucia and Dirk from the Transportation Department, it wasn't something that came up in our discussions either. So I'll leave it at that. There's not really hard and fast triggers that I know of as far as pedestrian volumes and requiring special treatment for crossings, but we'd be open to anything that the commission would want to look into.
Any other questions for staff or the Seeing none, would the applicant come forward, please?
Rachel Kreider, Resource Concepts.
First of all, are you going with all the, including the changes, the conditions of approval with the modifications? Are you good with all those?
I didn't hear modifications to
Well-
the conditions of approval.
Well, okay, I'm sorry.
Although,
Clarification, I'm sorry.
I will say there is one condition of approval that we would like some clarification on. And that is condition number 13 regarding the bonding. To specify that that is the public improvements portion of the project and not the private improvements.
Stephen Poteo, Development Engineering. The intent of the 10% warranty portion of that condition applies to the public improvements. If there was to be a final map prior to the on-site, any on-site improvements would also have to be bonded for. But the warranty portion of it would not apply to those on-site private improvements.
Is there anything you would like to add to Hope's presentation, or?
Hope covered it pretty well. I will add, just to summarize, we've got the 17 threeplexes, 2 3-bedroom units, 1 2-bedroom unit. They each have a 2-car garage. All of the garages front those streets, the internal streets. I may have missed it. The streets and the utilities all are going to be private once they get into the project itself. From a utility standpoint, there will be appropriate backflow protection and all of that that's necessary for that to be private infrastructure. The roadways and utilities and the property in general will be managed by an HOA. It is a condo development, so that'll be necessary. The surrounding area, like Hope mentioned, there's multifamily directly to the north. The property immediately to the east is also zoned multifamily. So we feel that this is an appropriate use and design for the site. The access is 2 driveways to Oak Street. All of the internal roadways are 26 feet clear access to keep the fire protection happy. So we've got that throughout the entire development. Like I said, those are private. The utilities are existing, both on Oak and Roland. So we intend to tie into water on Oak Street and on Roland Street, so it'll be a looped system. Sewer will be tying into existing sewer on Roland Street. And then storm drainage, we actually do have to extend it to an existing large drop inlet structure at Snyder and Roland, and that's included in the conditions as well. So we're aware of that and intend to incorporate that into the improvement plans. As Hope mentioned, the half street, and I believe Stephen as well, the half street improvements are included on this plan on Oak Street. And that actually will match, if you're familiar with the area, it'll match right up with the sidewalk that's existing to the north. I was gonna say the green light's on, but okay, I just need to be louder, I guess. So that'll match up with the sidewalk that's already existing immediately to the north. And that, so that section will basically be extended southward. And then on Roland Street, as Stephen mentioned, there's not a lot there right now. So the half-street improvements there include a little bit more paving width, as well as the sidewalk, curb, and gutter. That's not going to tie into anything on the east side because that's a single-family residence and there's not existing sidewalk over on that side. That on Roland Street as well, there's a bike lane required based on the Pathways Master Plan. So that's incorporated in the width of the section for that half-width improvement as well. So that's already designed for parking and a bike lane. I mentioned, that an HOA will be managing the property. We've got some common open space there as well, which will be, I know they're already looking at some landscape design to use that area most appropriately for the intended folks that would be living there. And other than that, I can address slightly, the lighting. Everyone is aware of the dark sky requirements, and that will be part of the design. The school district comment, we did reach out to the school district and contacted Andrew Fueling, who said, they don't object to the development. Also, despite projections, the school district is currently not seeing student growth. So we did reach out to them. They don't oppose the development. I don't know if I have anything else to add. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Commissioner Borders, and then I have one when you're done.
What's the demographic of your customer, your owner?
That's
What are you aiming at?
That's something I would defer to the developers for, if you'd like to come speak to that.
And while he's doing that, the other is there a maintenance responsibility for the HOA?
The HOA would be responsible for maintaining the roadways and utilities and landscaping within the private development.
But there's no place to store anything.
Such as, just
If
equipment?
they have maintenance requirements.
It would be pretty low maintenance. So, hiring a landscape maintenance company to come by once a week, that sort of thing.
All right.
It's not a real big site, so we don't anticipate staff.
Roger Remfer, Terramont LLC, managing partner. Based on sales of comparable property are we not on? Do we have it now? Good. Based on comparable sales to like property in Gardnerville and South Reno, we expect our demographic group to be relatively broad. The sister properties to this, or the comparable properties, have seen retirees coming in from California. We've seen retirees locally in the area who are looking to step down, if you will. And we figured that's going to be a very large segment. The balance we see as young professionals from the area here locally, as well as some of the surrounding areas where that cost of housing will be more costly than this product is in this location. So that's really what we're envisioning here based upon sales of the like properties.
I'm not being overly nosy, but it goes to the school problem. If a majority of your owners are older or younger, it's going to affect it one way or the other. And I was just curious as to where you thought
Understand.
you were going to go.
One quick question I had under background discussion on page 6, it mentions each condominium unit will include a 2-car garage and an additional 20 guest parking spaces. That would be like 340 parking spaces.
20 total for the whole development.
That's for the development, not each condominium. I kind of caught that. I was just looking, wondering where.
Yes,
they're gonna
please.
stack 'em. Commissioner Tingle.
Okay, my usual, I'm sure the staff get real tired of hearing me harp on this, but be that as it may. What is the median price point that you're looking at as far as these units go? And is there any affordable housing included in any of this mix?
The median price point will be about $350,000. The target base for
Nope, did it again. I think it's.
It's still
It's got
green.
green. We're on there. There we go.
Aren't we all?
So in terms of addressing the criteria that we commonly use for affordable housing, you might more accurately term this as potentially workforce housing. But depending upon what criteria you're using for affordable housing, I'm not sure that I can make the statement to that effect.
Okay, just for clarification's sake, I believe there was a forum held last year that set the median income here in Carson City as less than $50,000 annually. So for that income range, I'm thinking that there's going to be very few workforce individuals that are going to be able to afford this particular development, and that's fine. That's just a editorial comment because I feel compelled to make that just because I feel very strongly about affordable housing. Not to mention that, and there's no way we can force Carson Tahoe Health to come and give any kind of discussion about access to health care, which, sorry, there's a huge issue with access to health care, not even affordable health care, but access to health care, period, because there is a provider shortage nationwide, and we seem to be experiencing a lot of that here in Nevada. So that's just a comment, and I would feel remiss if I didn't make it when we talk about these developments. So thank you.
Very good, thank you.
And I will follow up again with the fact that it is not up to this planning commission. We have really little or no control over affordable housing. I just want to get that on the record as well. So thank you. Commissioner Doors.
Is there any plans to improve lighting along Oak Street, especially with all that actually along Oak or Roland with all the visitor parking around there for the city standpoint?
Stephen Poteo,
You're a
Development
busy
Engineering
man
again.
tonight.
I looked at Hope. I don't recall if we have a condition on lighting, but the development standards do require lighting based on zoning and the classification of the street. So I believe that there would be a requirement to have a light at the corner, and that would be the only spot, just based on my recollection of that standard. But I can look that up real quick here while we're.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we can change that or anything, but I do think it'd be interesting and for the record and for city staff to note, I mean, it's dark over there. I was just over there last night. We bowled and then we went to Roscoe Park, and it was, it's dark, like to the point where we had our kids with us and I was concerned to not let them go too far in that whole area. So, I mean, with the visitor parking right there, and especially along Roland Street where there's no gate, I don't know, maybe there's a walking gate or something, but you're not near the driveways. It is a concern of mine that area be well lit up for public safety's sake. I thought about maybe just making a condition to make a 6-foot fence, but I went with the diatribe instead.
Are we done?
Waiting.
I don't know that I need a response, more is just for the record. I think that it would be good for city to look into lighting that up.
All right. Other
If you want,
questions?
you can just say street lighting will be per city standard, and we can add it on. That way we'll remember to check on it when the construction plans come in.
Other questions for the applicant? Seeing none? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will open it up for public comment at this time. Is there any public comment on this project or this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it, oh, wait, we do have one. Come, if you'd like to come forward, ma'am, and state your name, we appreciate it. When you sit down, push the little button and the green light is lit at the base of the, there you go. When it's green, you're good to go.
I think I live.
Would you state your
I'm
name?
sorry.
Thank you.
My name is Carla Taylor, and I live at the corner of Roland and Oak. So I think you're forgetting that we've had the church across the street. So we did not see all the multifamily housing. And on Snyder, they developed sidewalks, and we thought, oh, that's up on Snyder. That doesn't concern us. And with lights, we still live on the south side of Roland, so we really don't want our houses lit. So I think you're forgetting that we've had quiet, and now we have a freeway behind us, and the state didn't build a wall behind us, so we have full force of the freeway. And now we have across the street a bunch of apartments going in. So for me, being on the corner where we need a light, I would like a time frame, because I see no option but to list my house for sale. And I'm thinking down the way, it's going to be the same thing, that we've had to deal with the freeway, and now across the street, a multifamily housing where we've had the church as a buffer. So is the church gone?
We'll answer the questions after everyone comments.
Okay.
Is anything else you'd like to add, ma'am?
No, that's it. That there are families that live there. So I think we're being forgotten when all of this planning has gone on. And to say, oh, you're used to multifamily housing, we've had a church.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to comment on this item? We have a to the question.
Right. Carla asked about the church, and the church is there. The plan is to demolish the church to build this. These folks will be purchasing the property from the church. I don't know what the timing is.
Thanks for that clarification. See no other public comment, bring it back for further discussion or a motion. Commissioner Doors?
I'll make a motion.
We take these one at a time, Hope? Okay.
All right. Commissioner Doors, for the record. I move to recommend approval of TSM-19-126 based on the ability to make the required findings and subject to the conditions of approval. I'm sorry, how would you like me, you said you wanted me to add verbiage on the end about the lighting.
Adding a condition that street lighting shall be per the city standards.
Okay. So I recommend to approve the aforementioned TSM-19126 based on the ability to make the required findings and subject to the conditions of approval and subject to the additional condition of approval that lighting surrounding the property be up to city standards.
I'll second.
We have a second from Commissioner Borders. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. You on a roll?
Commissioner Dorsey, for the record, I move to approve SUP-19-125 based on the ability to make the required findings and subject to the conditions of approval.
Doris makes a motion.
I'll second again.
Commissioner Borders seconds. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Next item, E7, SUP-19-123, for possible action, discussion, and possible action regarding a request for a special use permit for a single-family residential use on property zone retail commercial located at 1214 North Roop Street, APN 002-142-24. Heather?
Thank you. Heather Ferris for the record. The property is 0.14 acres in size and located in the retail commercial zoning district at the corner of North Roop and Corbett Streets. There is an existing 1,140 square foot office building which was converted from a single-family residence and a 580 square foot detached garage on the property. According to the assessor's records, the structures were built in 1946, and for at least the last 9 years, the property has been assessed as an office building. The property has had a commercial zoning district since at least 1972, and zoning maps prior to that are illegible. The applicant is seeking a special use permit to allow for a single-family residential use on a non-residential zoning district. As I noted, the property is zoned retail commercial. And it's surrounded on the north and west by single-family and multifamily uses. Immediately south are a mix of commercial and residential uses. And to the east, there are commercial uses, including a funeral home and cemetery and an NV Energy facility. Carson City Development Standards Division 1.18 outlines supplemental standards for residential use in a non-residential zoning district. There is a detailed analysis of how those standards are met on page 5 of the staff report. Division 1.18 also outlines supplemental findings that must be made. The Planning Commission must make 2 of the 4 supplemental findings in the affirmative, in addition to the 7 findings of fact that are required for approval of the special use permit. The Planning Commission is authorized to approve a special use permit upon making each of the required findings in the affirmative. Staff was able to make all 7 findings in the affirmative, as well as findings B and C of the supplemental findings, and is recommending approval of the special use permit, subject to 5 conditions of approval, which are included in the staff report. The applicant, Carl Bassett, is here and may wish to address the commission, and with that, I'm available for questions.
Any questions for staff? Seeing none, would the applicant come forward, please? State your name for the record.
Carl Bassett.
Mr. Bassett, first of all, you accept the 5 conditions of approval that are stated by staff?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and you'd like to add, or something you'd like to add to their presentation?
No, I think it makes sense.
Okay.
I'll answer any questions that you have on why, but.
Any questions for the applicant? Seeing none. Okay, thank you for coming forward.
Thank you.
At this point, we'll open it for public comment on this item. Does anyone wish to comment on this item? If not, seeing none, we'll bring it forward for discussion or a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move to I'd like to move to approve SUP 18-178 based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report.
We have a motion from Commissioner Borders, second from Commissioner Eschwein. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Good luck, sir. All right, moving on. E8 SUP-19-121. For possible action, discussion and possible action regarding a request for a special use permit for a wireless telecommunications facility in the designated Skyline area of property zone conservation reserve located south of Sea Hill, APN 009-021-02. Staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hope Sullivan. I have up on the screen, outlined in blue is the subject property, and the Skyline area is superimposed on that. So as this property, or the improvement is proposed in the designated Skyline area, a special use permit is required. I want to read to you just from the Municipal Code 1808-0302. It states, development of skylines and hilltops as designated on the Skyline area map must be carefully regulated and strongly discouraged. The applicant must explore every opportunity below the Skyline area. If there is no feasible alternative, the applicant must obtain a special use permit. These improvements have been installed without a special use permit. They're not there lawfully. But there is a benefit to them being there in that we're able to see what we're working with as opposed to using photo simulations to determine that. These improvements are on private property. I've had a lot of questions about allowing telecommunication facilities on city-owned open space. This is not on city-owned open space. It's on private property. I've also had questions about whether or not this improvement will compromise the trails. The Parks Department and Ann Bollinger is here from Open Space, went out and produced this exhibit for me. What you'll see in yellow on the subject property, and this is in your late material as well, is the trails that are actually on this property. They are not dedicated easements, but there are trails on this property. It's the EZ Trail. And what you'll see farther up is an arrow that locates the Connex box. So where this improvement has been located does not compromise that trailway system. I just wanted to put that out there because I know those were two big issues in the community, were whether or not this was on public land and whether or not this would compromise trails. Having said that, this is a request for a special use permit. The applicant has a right to due process and has a right to request the special use permit after the fact. As I tell you every meeting, I feel like when you consider a special use permit, you consider the 7 required findings of fact. I want to speak to 2 of these. The first one is master plan consistency. Guiding principle number 3 in the master plan talks about stewardship of the natural environment. It says the city will identify and conserve visually sensitive areas such as prominent hillsides surrounding the community. Goal 3.2 addresses protection of visual resources. Policy 3.2.A talks about limiting future hillside development. And policy 3.2.C talks about ensuring that communication facilities and equipment are located and designed so they don't detract from the city's visual quality. When this was first installed, there was a red Connex box on the hillside. I saw it at that time. When the application came in, I thought to myself, there's absolutely no way I'm supporting this application because of the things I just read to you about protecting the visual character of the hillside. When it came time to sit down and start writing, or I worked with Kathy Green on this, I went back out to the site just to confirm I was right. This was absolutely unacceptable. And I found that they did a good job. They really made it blend in. And I stared at where I had seen that red box, And it really looked like a rock outcropping when I was sitting at the base of the hill looking up. So I really felt they did a nice job with it. And there are a couple concerns, which thank you to the community for pointing out to me because I didn't see them myself, but the antennas. The antennas are shiny. I'm recommending those be painted a dull neutral color to make them disappear. But otherwise, I can make the finding regarding master plan consistency. Although every part of me thinks it's wrong to put something on the hillside, when it comes to communication facilities, they have to be elevated. And if we can make it disappear, I feel like we're consistent with the master plan. The second finding I want to address is finding number 5, which talks about meeting the definitions and specific standards of the zoning ordinance. In the staff report, I go through all the requirements for telecommunication facilities. And granted, this is before you as a skyline, because it's development in the skyline, but it is a telecommunication facility and it has to meet the requirements of telecommunication facilities. So you'll see I've included conditions of approval to mandate that compliance and consistent with finding 5, including that the applicant has to make provisions for co-location. We don't want a bunch of facilities. If we're going to have any facilities, we want them to co-locate, and that's mandated in the code. So there are other provisions which I've referenced in the conditions of approval, and those conditions are very specific to the telecommunication facility. In the staff report, there's an error, thank you, Mr. Chair, for catching it, where there's a reference to a 40-foot long container. This container is 20 feet, is not 40 feet. These improvements are proposed to have a height of 20 feet. So we're not talking, a lot of members of the public came in thinking they were going to get a very large telecommunication tower up there. That's not what's being proposed. And the good thing is a lot of folks who got notified and came in to see me and said, well, I want to know what it's going to look like. And I said, well, it's already there. And so I think that tells you how nicely it's blended. So again, the purpose of the skyline provisions is to protect the scenic quality of the city. And because I believe this is modified to a level where it is protecting the scenic quality, I can make the 7 findings of fact in the affirmative, and I am recommending approval. I'm happy to answer any questions. Barry Bannon with Highlands Wireless is the applicant, and he is present.
First of all, I noticed in there they mentioned about having something on there to notify if there's fire or whatever. It came to my mind, and I looked under the fire department saying about having a fire extinguisher, et cetera. Has there ever been a case where they've got solar up there where a solar panel started a fire? Because it's going to be sitting basically on the ground and a solar panel. I know it's got a clear vegetation around it, but I mean, do we have any history of fires being caused by solar?
I do not. Having said that, I will say this. The fire marshal was very concerned about this project, and he and Heather Ferris actually went to Lemon Valley, where the applicant had a similar installation, to look at that. And I know our fire marshal consulted with the fire department, the fire marshals up north on how they were handling these facilities. But he spoke quite extensively with the applicant. He toured other facilities that were similar, and he prepared his conditions with that knowledge. So I don't want you to think for a second our fire department didn't look very carefully into this, because they did. And I feel comfortable with the conditions they put in. The applicant may have experience that's different.
Other questions for staff? Would the applicant come forward, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. For the record, Barry Brannon, Chief Operating Officer, Highlands Wireless.
First of all, do you accept the conditions of approval?
Yes, sir.
I've just got a couple questions for you. I think she already answered one. I was going to ask if this is the first one you've built, but
Yes,
obviously there's one in Lemon Valley. Did Lemon Valley not require any permitting process or whatever?
No, sir. Because of 20-foot container and on the zoning for the properties that we are on in multiple counties, there was no permit, special use permit, or anything required.
Okay, I know for a fact, the property owner has built homes all over, commercial and homes all over Carson City. Somebody, whoever you were working with, no one advised you that you might have to get a permit or something, that you would just be able to go drop something on the skyline of an area?
No, sir, we were not informed, and that is our error, and we do apologize for that.
And my other question is, where does this, I mean, there's a lot of telecommunication, and I know this is a necessary, what does this serve differently than others around or whatever? What area is this taking care of?
We are strictly an internet service provider. We do not do the standard cellular telecommunication, so it's a much smaller site. This facility is geared around serving the underserved areas of Carson City for residential and commercial usage. And for those people who would rather work with local companies as opposed to the national AT&Ts and Spectrum charters.
So it's providing a like service, but through a local company?
Yes, sir.
Basically. Okay. So it's not specific, it has to be there because you're taking care of the people right below the hill that can't get whatever. It's just a general, okay.
Exactly.
Other questions for the applicant?
This is a wireless internet service provider. So you're taking internet off the satellite, retransmitting it to me as a user wirelessly on some frequency to my house, and I have an antenna?
I will defer that to our engineer.
Just like I was out in the middle of the country somewhere?
No, sir. John Schmoker, CEO, engineer for Highlands Wireless. We serve all our people via fiber down here in the valley. We microwave it up to the top of the site, and then we send it out to the customer's house. At no time do we touch satellites or in orbit. I believe you had a second question. I missed it.
So why does it have to be up on the hill?
In order to see people's houses, if you're down low.
No, you just said you microwaved it down to your station where you distributed it.
No, sir. The other way. We go from down below up high to distribute it to the people. We need the high purview and altitude in order to bypass trees
All
and see
right,
people.
and how do I receive it in my house then?
You have a small dish. It's about 14 inches right.
Yeah,
8
and it
inches
points
tall.
up at the hill.
That is correct, sir.
Okay. If it was 100 feet down from the hill, you could still point it to the hill, couldn't I?
Could, but then you have to go through trees and that would block the signal. We're transmitting at extremely low powers, 1/2 of 1 watt.
What's the frequency?
We operate mainly in the 5 gig realm, at least to the customer.
Other questions for the applicant? No?
Can I make
Oh, I'm sorry, and you're all more than welcome to add to whatever they have presented and give to us. Go ahead.
Graham Kent, Director of the Nevada Seismological Laboratory, and also Chief Architect of Alert Wildfire. And I guess I'm here to highlight the first co-locator. And if many of you realize, and we talked a little bit about whether the solar panels could cause a fire. We are building networks across the West. There's also cameras that are already overseeing some of your regions here, have actually helped BLM and your local fire services in the past years knock down some fires recently. And we're now working with Highland Wireless, as we are in California, as we build out 1,000 cameras in California. We're doing the same type of strategy here, working with the BLM, Forest Service, NV Energy, some other NGOs. And one of the opportunities to push out cameras quickly is to take advantage of these wirelit internet service providers. I spend most of my time in areas that have been burned over, and I live here, and I don't want to see that happen here. And so for us, it's about quickly identifying regions where these cameras can be of advantage and getting them out quickly and co-locating them so we don't have to, at the lab, build our own tower next to another tower that already exists. So again, thank you for hearing me out, but this site gives us some definite view sheds for really essentially for your firefighters to get early knockdown opportunities. And that's what we're going for. And like I said, there's a lot going on in the West right now through the University of Nevada, Reno, UC San Diego, and University of Oregon. And we want to not only use this one, but we're doing several other sites from Highland Wireless that will serve this local region. So thank you.
I have one other question. As far as coverage, is this going to be able to cover all of Carson City, or are you going to try to put some up on Duck Hill or somewhere else to try to get other parts of town? I mean, what is the coverage of this particular unit?
The coverage is basically line of sight. Our target audience is within 2 to 6 miles at max. Much further than that, then the speeds slow down to where the customers don't appreciate them. We already have some other sites in the area. Obviously, we would like to have more. We're pretty good at clandestinely hiding them. So we would like to work with the council and the other departments to find out where there's places where we can tuck them in back behind things where they're not seen, but yet can still do their job.
Thank you. Commissioner
What
Ashwine.
kind of security is there? I go up there a lot, and I see off-road vehicles all the time up there. And I just wonder, is this a really secure facility, or are you going to have to be maintaining it or protecting it on a fairly regular basis?
The building itself, well, I mean, wood was one of our first choices, then we started thinking about fire and some other things. We said, okay, we need to go steel. So yes, it is steel. There is a padlock there to prevent them from getting the door. We'll have 2 cameras at the very end. They are motion sensitive. We have a talkback system, so when somebody comes up to the site, we can let, hey, you in the blue shirt and the red shorts, stand back, sheriff's already been called. So that's the limit of our security. We're not looking to place large, ugly fences or anything such as this. We are somewhat depending on citizens to be reasonably good citizens. I mean, vandalism and theftage is a real thing, but the main thing that's exposed is our antennas and our solar panels. Everything's locked inside other than that.
Thank you.
Other questions for the applicant? Go ahead, Commissioner Preston.
Okay, you indicated that you had other Calistine locations. Do you have them here in Carson City?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now, did they get special use permits?
They were not needed where we needed to go there.
Oh, okay, no, the
Placing-
reason I'm asking is because the line of sight from Sea Hill only sees to a certain place.
Correct.
And I do a lot of commercial real estate, and we have people that are looking for internet, that they don't always have that. So I'm just trying to figure out coverage.
We can produce a rough coverage map for you, but how do I say this? It's one of the downfalls of hiding the site too much, then we can't talk to the homeowner and say, okay, can you look here and do you see that? Okay, we can get to you then, no problem. Some of our sites are more visible in other locations. Due to the rules in this area here, we try to keep them as quiet and as blending as possible. So that's going to be a little bit difficult to do. Well, it'll actually cost us time and money to send people out and do what's called a site survey. And as long as the site survey is positive, then we can go ahead and install the customer, business or commercial or residential. We don't care who the customer is. We take all.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
Public comment. Let's these gentlemen give them a chance to clear the table, and we'll take public comment on this item. Yes, sir. Could you state your name for us?
My name's Todd Mason, and I'm just saying I've been here 22 years in Carson City. Most of my work revolves around internet service. Unfortunately, here in this town, as you probably all know, the 2 major providers, AT&T and Spectrum, just are absolute worthless here. I've lived in 4 different locations, and the only offers I've been able to get with AT&T is basically dial-up speed. With Spectrum, I can get Spectrum, but their service has been up and down. Because of my work, I rely on the internet to be up all the time. I have servers running 24/7, and I'm probably talking to Spectrum twice a week, 3 times a week, because my internet's offline. Where I am currently at, I can see the Sea Hill itself. I cannot see the other locations. I've been trying with Highlands Wireless to get internet over to that place. And it's one of the only options available in this region, unfortunately. And because it's a local company, I've been able to talk to these guys. I can actually go to their offices, sit down with them, talk with them. If there's an issue, I can get on the phone with them or even go into the office and say, hey, I've got a problem here. So I see this as an opportunity for Carson City to get another provider that can expand the internet for everybody here. And that way we don't have to deal with the big corporations that just don't seem to care. That's all I'd say.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other public comment on this? Yes, sir. Would you come forward, state your name for us?
Hi, Scott Morrison. I want to start by saying I thank you very much to the commission for the way that you've handled everything and really tried to answer all the questions, so I appreciate that. The proposal says that the container holds equipment for internet, and I'm just curious to get more detail on what that means, what's in the container, mainly because it's a recreational area. There are people up and about that area quite often, and I wonder if there's any outside analysis of potential health concerns. I know the engineer mentioned low levels of energy, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. I appreciate the history on the skyline areas that's provided. I wasn't aware of that. I really appreciate that our community has sought to protect some of those areas, and I think that that's got to be taken very seriously if there's some precedent to be set by allowing for structures like this to be placed, because it may open the door for more of that to be argued for. But also, is there a clear benefit to the community here? There seems to be potential for increased internet service. I think that's good. But what does that service map really look like? Putting this in such a valuable location had better yield an equally valuable kind of result for the people here. And so those are some of my concerns lead me to with this issue. The other is, if the commission allowed this to go forward, would that leave room for further improvements in the same area, or would it be limited to the picture that we see here and the impact that we can already see on Sea Hill? Thank you very much.
And we'll answer all the questions after we get we'll take more public comment if there's any more out there. Yes.
Mr. Chairman. For the record, Dwight Millard, property owner. I don't think what's in the building is of much consequences for danger to people being up there, because there's not supposed to be anybody up there. That is private property, and signs have been ordered to post that property. The yellow trail is in somebody's imagination. There is no trail up there. The green roads, all of that's up there, and people use it quite frequently, and they are trespassing. And I just want to make that clear. I'm not sure if the only reason that is a permit is needed is because of the height. Is that correct? Okay, my question is could this container be located further down on the hill, outside of the whatever you call that, the mountain range or whatever you call it? No, it's not necessarily skyline. I think it's above 5,000 feet. It's an elevation thing, I think, and not necessarily skyline. It's to protect the skyline, and that was determined as a height elevation, and nothing can be built above those lines. Albeit that parcel is zoned and could have one home per 20 acres. So you could build about 20 homes up there, I suppose. But my question is could this be located without a special use permit somewhere out of the red hatched area, which there are several sites up there that would be very good and see a long ways. We contemplated building a restaurant there, one that actually went around in circles, and you can see as far south as Carson Valley and all of Eagle Valley. So I think the gentlemen who have approached us and leased this property have done an outstanding job to hide it and to make it blend in with what's up there. I live up there they told me where it was at. They came by and showed me on a map. I still haven't seen it. I can't see it. It's hidden in the rocks. If you haven't seen it yourself, you probably can't. Probably be seen from the backside, but you shouldn't be back there. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm in support of it, by the way.
Any other public comment? If not, we'll bring it back for some answers and whatever. I was just comment a little on my own. It initially, I mean, the fact it was put up there before, it should have gone up there. We've had fences built, people come in and you can always apply post for a special use permit. Again, I was up there just today and had to get back further to see it rather than right at the base of the hill. And again, it's up in the rocks. I think I could barely see an antenna or whatever, and that's going to be remedied. But the other thing tying in as well, I picked up from the presentation was the fire thing with the cameras. So, I mean, that's something that is going to be a benefit. So anyway, that's just something I wanted to say. But address the others?
Okay, in terms of what is in the container, I don't know exactly what's in the container, but I do know that our fire marshal had a very extensive tour of the facility in Lemon Valley. He's very concerned about wildfire in this area. And if you look at the conditions of approval, starting at number 3 through 9, those are all fire related. You rarely see many conditions from our fire department. So he has definitely regulated what can be stored in that container. And the fire department does have the ability to conduct inspections. There will be no hazardous materials in it. He's concerned about the type of batteries they use because of the type of gases that may be created. So I think with these conditions, it's very extensive in terms of looking at what's stored there vis-a-vis public safety. In terms of further improvements to the area, I was actually really specific about that in condition 11. I'm just going to read it out loud in case the audience doesn't have the report. What I wrote is recognize that the use has established without a special use permit. Should this special use permit be approved, no additional equipment or structures, including fencing, may be erected outside of the container. Also, the mountain peaks, end quote, that have been attached to the container to avoid horizontal lines must be maintained in place. So if there's any modification to what we see right now today on the exterior, it will be considered a modification to the special use permit and subject to review by this commission with a public hearing. Mr. Millard asked, why is a special use permit required? And you notice the red hatching area, which is the skyline designation. If development occurs in that area, it may only occur subject to a special use permit. And I read the code section that kind of explained that we do discourage development there. There's not an outright prohibition, but I think it's probably as strongly discouraged as I've ever seen in the code. And if it needs to be there and it can't be located somewhere else, this commission has the authority to grant a special use permit and allow it to be there. Could a telecommunication facility go on the balance of the property outside the red hatch skyline designated area? Yes, it could, subject to compliance with the development standards, which are referenced in the staff report. Thank you.
So if it moved outside the red area still on that property, it wouldn't need to be here.
Correct. It is here by virtue of being in the
Fact that
area
it's already there,
designated as
that's right.
skyline.
And I believe it was just mentioned that those trails are on private property, and I guess they're used by the general public, and to this point, they've been allowed just because they go up there. But it sounds like they may be stopping the use of those trails, possibly. Thank you. Commissioner Doors.
My question, I do have one question to Mr. Morrison's regarding or following up with his initial question for Highlands. What are your realistic speeds that you're looking at for your standard product, or could you, if you have several different levels, if you could break that down for us? Because I think it's a very interesting question. If you're going to take up valuable property, even if it's private, it's valuable to the eyes, you know, we want a valuable return on it.
That makes sense. John? There you go. John Schmoker again. Yes, our speeds are standard for the residential market are 25 by 5. We have faster speeds for commercial counts, such as 100 by 100 or 250 by 250, whatever their needs are. We kind of stop at about 250 by 250. That's about the limit of what we can deliver to any one person off of that site.
Are you finding in residential applications that you're actually clocking 25?
We actually guarantee our speed. We're the only company that does such. We offer the 95 and 95 guarantee.
Thank you.
May I answer one of the other questions that was posed?
Please.
As far as the transmit power, our maximum transmit power by FCC limitation is 1/2 of 1 watt. When this gentleman puts his phone up to his head, it's a 3-watt transmitter up to his head, as opposed to a 1/2 a watt that's a mile away.
Thanks for that clarification. Further discussion or a motion?
I'd just like to make a statement. I think this sort of stuff, being a child of the information age and being vehemently opposed to corporate control over things, I think that local internet is an incredible asset to have for every community, and it should be involved. It should be encouraged more so than it is. And I think we're kind of in a tricky situation because of the Skyline thing. But for the record, I think that projects and companies like yours are doing a good service for the country. Thank you.
I'd like to make a statement as well with the question about if moved out of that area. I just assume it's well hidden up there and seems to be functioning well where it is behind those rocks and stuff. And if we were to not approve this or whatever, and I agree with you that I think local providers are important, I would rather not see something than moved further on the private property to where, you know, we have no control over it. So at least there, we know it's there and what it's doing, but that's just how I feel. Orders?
Yes, my comment is twofold. Number one, I think the whole planning process in this thing was flawed. And the sales process is even more flawed. If you would show me a map that shows where the coverage is and show me how important it is, then it's easier for me to make a decision that says, leave it in the Skyline area as opposed to, like the property owner suggested, can we move it down the hill 50 feet? If we move it down the hill 50 feet, if the coverage doesn't change, why don't we move it down the hill? But the problem is that the applicant hasn't provided us with that information to make those decisions. We're stuck with what they have put up there, which is put up there without permission, without a permit. Shame on them. And then there's no good way to show that it's essential for us to make this, quote, sacrifice. And I have a problem with that. I would, if this came to us, initially, I think I would be more inclined to say, go away and do your homework and bring this back when it's done. And, you know, I just don't feel good about the way this whole thing has evolved.
Well, Commissioner Borders, I see where you're coming from with that, but we also would have the option to continue this because he mentioned he could get us a coverage map. If it's that important of an item, we could continue this and bring it back next month with a coverage map, or have the coverage map presented to staff or whatever, and then continue it.
I will just point out, we do have a letter in the file, which I'm trying to locate it right now, from a third-party engineer verifying that this is the only location. There is not an alternative location. So that was a requirement, and that is in the file. I'm locating it right now.
No, but if the particular location in the 5-mile range only covers 15% of Carson City, is there a cost benefit not only to the provider but to the city to give up what they have? I just don't think we have all the information I would like to have had to make this decision in the front, especially with all the thank you, that have occurred since then.
I would just like to say, Lee Plemmel, Community Development Director, I would just like to say how we looked at it. We believe that this is actually the best location on that property. Yes, they could move it farther down the hill and keep it on the ridge, maybe make it more visible, provide better coverage to other areas. We were more looking on it from the impact side. I think from our looking at it side is to hide it as much as possible, which I think they selected a great location. They put it behind rocks as much as possible and built it in. So you could certainly tell them they should locate it. They've chosen to locate it here to meet their needs. You may find that there's a location somewhere else that's lower and covers a different area that you may feel is better. I don't know that that would be their opinion. And I think we looked at it going forward that this is actually the best location on this property in terms of keeping it as hidden as possible from the public.
Actually, if I could just reframe it real quick, we're not looking at whether or not they can have a telecommunication facility. We're looking at the impact of the visual impact on the scenic quality of Carson City. So I think in going through the findings of fact, if you go through recognizing why this is before you, it's not yes, the chairman found the independent letter from Desert Engineering. This is before you based on the visual impact on the skyline, not for permission to have a telecommunication facility.
Can the applicant make a point to that?
Certainly. Sir, someone want, I thought the other gentleman wanted to speak as well.
Co-locator. No. Graham Kent, Nevada Seismological Laboratory for the record. No, one of the things is for a fire camera, that location is great. And so if it were to be moved downhill, then we would be here with the same owner trying to move a fire camera to the top of the same hill. So the great thing about it is we're doing co-lo, and that I think is a win-win, because we can get that camera up sooner than me having to go through this whole process again to help protect your area. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
May I say a word, Mr. Chair? For the record, Ann Bollinger, Open Space Administrator.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
So Mr. Plemmel shared with you that they looked over the property and in their opinion, this is the best site, and I would have to agree with that. I have actually physically gone to the site, drove up all the way to the box. It's not an easy drive. Now our vehicle's in the shop for repair. But it really is the best site on this property. The pictures do show the rock outcrop. They placed it behind natural features on the landscape. They did try to cover the box. So I can tell you from being there on site in person that I would agree with the recommendation.
Thank you for that input.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to comment.
Commissioner Eswine.
As a resident that walks out my front door and looks directly at this site, I have to say that, the only thing that I've ever noticed here is the pole that the antenna is on, and I have looked at it several times in the last few days to see if I can make out the box, and I can't. And I live right at the bottom of Sea Hill, and I think they did a great job of blending it in with the physical characteristics of the site.
Just a matter from the angle, will the pole be blue or will it be brown, I guess? So as to what angle you're looking at it. Anyway, further comments? Commissioner Wiggins.
Question for staff on condition 11. It's talking about no additional equipment or structures. I didn't see anywhere on here a height requirement. So what I'm thinking is, what about if this antenna isn't tall enough? Would that be considered additional equipment or structures if they decide to raise this thing to that 120 feet that's allowable?
Condition number 2 says all development shall be substantially in accordance with the development plans approved with this application unless otherwise modified by the conditions of approval. So essentially, they need to comply with what they presented to you, and what they presented to you is a maximum height of 20 feet. In fact, I believe their application even says it in some places 15. So yeah, if they were to say, you know what, Hope, 20 feet's not doing it, we need to get to 30 feet or even 25 feet, I'd say it's gonna be a modification to your special use permit. Having said that, I don't think there's any harm if we want to say the maximum height is 20 feet, and any modification to that height will be a modification to the special use permit.
What is the height of that complete now to the top of the antenna? Is that the 20 feet? 15.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Borders.
they brought up an interesting point. We've been talking about co-locating a camera up there. We just told them they couldn't co-locate with anybody.
No, they can't. They have to.
Have to. Okay,
If somebody else wants to go in up there, they have to,
all right.
yeah.
I know, it's time to go home.
On that note, so condition 11 says no additional equipment. What if they need another camera up there? Or is your camera installed already?
Cameras are not installed, but they'll just be placed on the current poles.
No additional equipment or structures are allowed. Should we consider changing that language?
We could address the fire cameras separately, that they, somehow couldn't we, I don't know, how do we handle that?
I think that.
I think we agree we
Yeah.
want some fire cameras there.
Yes, we
But we
do.
can't, we don't want prohibited either.
I think the way it's worded, the no additional equipment is in that box or whatever. It's basically what's there is what you're gonna see.
I think it's ambiguous. I think it
We
might
need
be
to
better to
clarify.
change that wording so that it allows for co-location, because if you read that one way, it could mean that you couldn't put anything else up there. Which is totally contrary to what we want to do.
Well, was I right or was I wrong?
Or do you want to say no, other than cameras, no additional equipment or structures, including fencing, may be erected? Are we looking at anything other than cameras?
Well, they might put some more equipment in the box. I mean, if you read that,
No, in the box is okay.
does it say outside the structure?
Could we add just a condition, that only 2 or however many cameras, just to make it as easy as possible, however many cameras they're looking to do for the fire thing, we add a condition saying those 2 can be added, period.
Yeah, but we want them to co-locate other telecommunication facilities too, so.
Yeah, but they still have to get approval if they want to do that.
What,
Commissioner Preston?
yeah, one of the things I wanted to kind of bring up is, these guys are bringing a new group to the table. When I did a lot of work with the state, we had locators on McClellan, Duck Hill, Snow Valley, Downit, and Stewart, and so forth. And those towers were actually getting a little bit overloaded. And so this has a new view corridor. My question is would they be able to locate with something like the DPS group? If DPS wanted to be on this group, or if some of these other emergency people wanted to be on there, are they going to have to come back to us every time to put up an emergency system or anything like that? So that's a question.
It seems to me that if we're saying that we want them to co-locate other equipment, that it shouldn't be required that they come back. This is the facility, and the additional equipment, as long as it doesn't go over the height,
So then just add the height requirement on 11.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Might I suggest a portion of the permit simply stipulate that within the 20-foot container, nothing other than solar panels, we do have solar panels going out one side, that footprint shall not be exceeded. And a height of 20 foot shall not be exceeded. Because as growth happens, when we have to place radios and antennas, they cost us money, they're not free. Once we get to our loading specs with our current antennas and our current radios, we're gonna have to add. That's normal. But I have no problem with never leaving the footprint of the 20-foot container and the solar panels and stopping at 20 foot.
And anything added or whatever in that height would be painted, colored, neutral,
Subject
whatever, so that
to the
there wouldn't be a
requirements.
problem. I think that will cover it. What's that? If they needed the emergency for an intent, whatever, as long as it's staff and neutrally colored, I think, and brought to staff before it's done.
Doesn't have to be.
Well, okay, or whatever, but it has to be neutrally colored. Am I on the right path?
What I hear you all saying is you like what he's just suggested, where we have the container, you have a maximum height of 20 feet, you have an established footprint, and anything new that goes in that footprint, and the footprint includes that 20-foot height, must be painted a neutral color, so that essentially disappears, a flat neutral color. That's what I'm hearing you say.
So can we
Does
just?
that work, Commissioner Esplin or Commissioner
Well,
Doris?
We're going to have to modify 14 then, because the last sentence there says that new equipment associated with the co-location will require a modification. Can we leave it to the staff to do the modification as long as it meets that, the criteria that it stay within the footprint?
Okay.
Does that work?
And if I may, to Commissioner Preston, yes, we work with law enforcement, we work with state, local. They're our friends, they help us, we like them. Okay. Correct. We've been backup radio sites for more than a few LEOs.
So for clarification purposes, we're amending 14 by striking the last sentence. We are amending 11 by adding, no additional equipment or structures, including fences, may be erected outside of the container or above the 20-foot height limit.
I think it's slightly different. I think, I agree with you on 14, the last sentence is being struck. On 11, I think we're striking all the wording. And what you're saying is that the existing footprint may not be expanded and any new equipment may not exceed the maximum height of 20 feet. All equipment is to be painted a dull neutral color.
To be double sure, the footprint includes height. We can use footprint to include width and height in this application. Okay.
Okay. We're getting there. And then once we have those, you folks are amenable to the changes?
Very acceptable, sir.
Okay.
Other than, could y'all choose the color? I'm not very good at colors.
No, yeah, work with staff on the color, if you'd be so kind. All right, back for
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Eschwein.
Make a motion. I move to approve SUP-19-121 based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval as amended contained in the staff report.
And I will second that motion. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank
I
you.
voted yes. Don't come back and bite us again. I voted yes.
I did.
Thank you.
It's still,
Moving on with the agenda, staff reports. Non-action items, director's report. Lee?
Yeah, very, very briefly, there weren't any planning commission items that went to the Board of Supervisors in August. I'll just note that on September 5th at the Board of Supervisors meeting, the final subdivision map for Schultz Ranch Phase 4 is going before them to record the final phase of the other part of the Schultz Ranch development that you saw tonight. And for next month at the Planning Commission, a little bit lighter, but still have a special use permit for, what's the one at the Carson Mall for? That's the gaming. For a bar use in retail commercial. And we have the RV park on Old Hot Springs Road is coming back. They are actually looking to do a planned unit development RV park for an ownership product. So that'll be coming back. But those are the two main items on that. I also plan to bring a legislative update to you after kind of now that the legislature's done, just to kind of go over some of the legislation related to planning that's been adopted. There are a couple things we have to do in terms of code by certain dates coming up in the future. And then just lastly, I'll note, two more things. I'll note that our next Title 18 workshop is Thursday, September 26th at 3 p.m. at our office. That's the day after the next Planning Commission meeting. So after we discussed that plan of doing it the week before, and I looked at the calendar the rest of the year, we're going to have to discuss some alternate dates as the holidays are coming up this year. But we have this date for September 26th, and we'll be finishing up some discussion, hopefully going over the use tables again and getting into 1805. And then finally, I think last time somebody asked about an update on the Brunswick materials. That's the access to the Brunswick Canyon and related to that special use permit. So just really quick, that they're working on the DA's office is working with them, looking at the effluent easement. So they're working with the city now to get the effluent easement down the alignment. They're working with Parks Department on the signage and working on getting codes to the gate to the Sheriff's Park Department and Public Works. And that concludes my report.
Under Commissioners' comments and reports, I'd like to mention something. I was down talking to staff today and had noticed the apartments on Hot Springs Road, and they had not come to us. There was apartments going down towards Walmart, and come to find out that those are affordable housing apartments being put in, 64 of them. It's an offshoot of the ones for the veterans that was done it's the same group. So I thought that was kind of neat to see.
Yes.
But as I said, it hadn't come to us, so I'd asked them, and they said, oh, no, that's affordable housing. And I thought of you immediately.
Did you?
Yes,
Oh,
I
you're
did.
so nice.
You obviously already knew that. No, you didn't?
I did not know that.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just to kind of follow up, I had promised myself I would never talk about Brunswick Canyon materials again, but since you brought it up, I am curious. They have not gotten the codes to the fire department and the police department as of yet? Okay, can we clarify that
Okay.
statement,
Get him
please?
going again.
And then we can go home.
We are telling them what the code will be so they can code the gates. But because the effluent pipe easement is not recorded yet, and because the signs have been agreed to, but they're not fully erected yet, until we check those two boxes, they can't close the gate, so we don't need the code.
Mr. Chairman, if you'll check for public comment, then I'll make a motion.
Is there any public comment at this time? Seeing none, I'll take a motion.
I move we adjourn.
I'll second. We're adjourned.